Imagine stepping back in time. You push open a heavy, carved door and the air around you shifts. A faint scent of old incense and polished wood hangs heavy. You are not just observing history, you are entering it. Tonight, we journey into the meticulously choreographed lives of emperors and their countless servants. Forget the grand battles and the sweeping edicts for a moment. Instead, focus on the intricate, often bizarre, daily rituals that defined imperial power. You will witness the silent ballet of countless hands, the precise timing of every gesture, and the strange rules that governed even the simplest acts, from waking to sleeping. These are the forgotten details, the silent machinery of absolute authority, designed to elevate one individual to an almost divine status, hour by hour, day after day. You find yourself standing in the deepest quiet of a pre-dawn palace. The air is still, heavy with the scent of beeswax and ancient stone. Outside, the world might be stirring with the first birdsong, but within these formidable walls, a different, far more intricate dawn chorus is about to begin. This is not the melody of nature. It is the hushed, precise symphony of servitude, played out by hundreds, sometimes thousands of individuals, all preparing for the awakening of a single all-powerful figure, the Emperor. Imagine the absolute darkness of the vast complex. No electric lights to banish the shadows. Only the faintest glimmer from a distant guard's lantern might pierce the gloom of a long, cold corridor. You shiver slightly, feeling the chill seep up from the flagstones through your worn shoes. This is an hour when even the lowest-ranking servant feels the weight of the coming day. Their lives are dictated not by the sun, but by the ritualistic timetable of their sovereign. In the deepest parts of the palace, perhaps in the kitchens or the laundry rooms, the first fires are already stoked. You can almost hear the soft, rhythmic scrape of shovels as glowing embers are coaxed into flame, the crackle of kindling a whisper against the profound silence. These are the earliest risers, the unseen gears in the colossal machine. They are preparing the initial warmth, the first drafts of water, the basic necessities that will ripple upwards through the palace hierarchy. You might hear the soft padding of bare feet or the gentle thud of heavy wooden buckets being set down. Water carriers, their shoulders aching, are hauling water from wells or cisterns, often in the bitter cold, their breath misting in the frigid air. This water is destined for countless purposes. For the emperor's morning ablutions, for the brewing of his morning tea or coffee, for the cleaning of his apartments, and for the needs of his immediate retinue. Every drop is precious, every journey arduous. As the absolute darkness begins to yield to a dim gray light filtering through tall, narrow windows, the activity slowly intensifies, though always remaining muted, respectful of the sleeping monarch. You might catch the faint scent of wood smoke now, mingling with the slightly stale air of the vast interior. Somewhere, a fire tender is carefully kindling the hearth in the emperor's antechamber, ensuring a comfortable warmth will greet the first courtier's allowed entry. This is not a simple task. It is performed with practiced efficiency, leaving no trace of smoke or ash, only gentle warmth. You move through the long, echoing corridors, now accompanied by the faint rustle of heavy fabrics as higher-ranking servants begin their ascent. These are not the water carriers or the fire tenders. These are the personal valets, the chamberlains, the barbers, the dressers, each moving with an almost preternatural silence. Their footsteps are muffled, their voices hushed to barely audible whispers. They carry fresh linen, expensive perfumes, polished silver, and rich garments. Each item has been meticulously prepared and inspected. Consider the role of the clothing attendant, for example. In many imperial courts, the emperor's attire was not a matter of personal choice, but a complex statement of power, status, and even political alignment. You watch as a valet, his face etched with concentration, carefully lays out the silken robes or embroidered coat chosen for the day. Every fold must be precise, every button secure, every jewel gleaming. He knows that the slightest imperfection could be seen as an insult, a lapse in respect, potentially incurring severe punishment. Now you are closer to the imperial chambers. Here the air feels different, charged with a quiet tension, a sense of anticipation. The light is still dim, but the first flickering lamps within the antechambers cast long, dancing shadows on gilded walls and rich tapestries. You might hear the distant, almost imperceptible tinkle of a small bell, signaling that the imperial family, or perhaps just the empress, has begun to stir. This tiny sound sets off a chain reaction throughout the nearby servants' quarters. For rulers like Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, the act of waking was not a private moment but a meticulously choreographed state ritual known as the lever du roi, the king's rising. Imagine yourself standing in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, not during the day's opulent festivities, but in the pre-dawn stillness. You are one of the privileged few, granted access to the earliest stages of this daily performance of power. The ritual begins with the petit lever, the small rising. You stand with perhaps a dozen or two of the highest-ranking and most intimate courtiers. These are not just servants. They are dukes, princes, trusted advisors, all eager for the rare privilege of witnessing the king in his most private moments, hoping to catch his eye, whisper a request, or simply bask in the reflected glory of his presence. Inside the royal bedchamber, the first valet de chambre, a position of immense trust and influence, has already entered. He approaches the bed, carefully drawing back the heavy velvet curtains that shield the king from the dawn light. You hear his soft, deferential greeting, a murmur that signals the start of the day. The king stirs. He is not alone in the room. Sometimes his physician or a confessor might already be present. The ritual of the petit lever unfolds with precise, unhurried steps. You observe as the king is first offered a small drink, perhaps a cup of broth or warm wine, by a designated attendant. Then the important moment of the king's washing. While a full bath was not a daily occurrence for Louis XIV, a symbolic ablution of his hands and face was. You might see a gold basin and pitcher brought forward, and the king's hands delicately washed, a ritual performed by one of the most senior attendants, often a prince of the blood or an influential duke, signifying profound honor. Next comes the shirt. This seemingly simple act was laden with meaning. The king's personal shirt was brought in by a designated officer. The most esteemed figures present, usually a prince of the royal family or a close relative, would have the honor of holding the shirt ready as the king slipped his arms into it. You watched this silent transfer, the weight of tradition and hierarchy hanging in the air. To be allowed to assist the king with his shirt was a mark of supreme favor, a clear signal of your standing in the court. As the king is dressed in his breeches and waistcoat, still with the assistance of several high-ranking courtiers, the doors to the antechamber are opened a second time. This marks the beginning of the grand lever, the great rising. Now, the room swells with perhaps 100 or more additional courtiers, all of whom have been waiting patiently, perhaps for hours, in the outer halls. You are now jostled slightly as more dukes, marquises, generals, and state officials pour in. The atmosphere shifts. It is no longer a private moment, but a public spectacle. The conversations in the room grow slightly louder, a controlled murmur of greetings and whispered conversations, though always respectful of the king's presence. You see the king, now more fully dressed, take his place in a specially designated chair. His barber approaches, a delicate and potentially dangerous task. You imagine the keen glint of the razor, the skilled hands, the silent prayer that no mistake is made. The king's hair is combed and dressed, often powdered and styled into the elaborate fashion of the day. All this happens before the assembled court. While this is occurring, courtiers present petitions, discuss matters of state, and vie for the king's attention. To be acknowledged by the king during his lever was a significant boost to one's prestige. To be overlooked could be a political setback. You witnessed the king complete his dressing, choosing the final accessories: his sword, his hat, his gloves. Each item is presented by a specific official, adhering to strict protocol. The whole process, from the first drawing of the bed curtains to the king being fully dressed and ready for his day, could last for hours. It was not just about getting ready, it was about reaffirming the social order, demonstrating the king's absolute power, and providing a daily opportunity for courtiers to gain favor. This intricate dance was not unique to the French court. Across continents and centuries, similar rituals defined the mornings of emperors and their households. Consider the emperors of China, for example, whose lives were regulated by an even more rigid and ancient etiquette, managed by legions of eunuchs. You can almost feel the chill of the Forbidden City in the pre-dawn hours. There too, the day would begin long before the emperor stirred. Teams of eunuchs, sworn to absolute silence and obedience, would prepare his chambers. You might imagine them inspecting every detail: the temperature of the room, the freshness of the tea, the arrangement of his writing implements. Unlike the public spectacle of Versailles, the Chinese emperor's waking was often more private, yet still involved a vast, invisible army. The first eunuch, or a trusted chamberlain, would be the one to rouse the emperor. There would be no loud calls, no sudden movements. A gentle whisper, perhaps a soft touch. The emperor was sacred, almost divine, and his waking was treated with the utmost reverence. You might see them assist him from his dragon bed, help him into his morning robes, and attend to his washings. Even the morning meal, typically a private affair, involved an elaborate choreography. In the Chinese court, you would see a procession of eunuchs carrying covered dishes from the imperial kitchens, meticulously tasted for poison by others before they ever reached the emperor's lips. Each dish would be placed in a specific order, presented with a precise bow. The emperor would often eat in silence, surrounded by attentive, silent figures, their lives entirely devoted to anticipating his every need. In the Ottoman Empire, within the labyrinthine Topkapi Palace, the Sultan's morning was also a testament to meticulous planning and a hierarchy of service. You might picture the dimly lit corridors of the harem, where the Sultan's personal attendants, often young pages or trusted eunuchs, would begin their duties. They would prepare his bath, sometimes a ceremonial one, with scented oils and warm waters. The clothing would be selected from vast wardrobes, each garment a symbol of status and occasion. You would see the Sultan rise, not to the cacophony of a bustling modern household, but to the quiet, practiced movements of his dedicated staff. His morning prayers, his first council meetings, even the presentation of important documents, were all integrated into a seamless, highly structured morning routine designed to uphold his supreme authority. Why such elaborate performances, you might ask? Why could an emperor not simply wake up, dress himself, and eat breakfast like any other person? The answer lies in the very nature of absolute power. These rituals, repeated day after day, served multiple purposes. Firstly, they reinforced the emperor's divine or semi-divine status. By requiring so many individuals, often high-ranking nobles, to participate in the most intimate aspects of his morning, it elevated him above ordinary humanity. You see how every gesture, every bow, every deferential whisper, solidifies his position as the center of their universe. Secondly, these rituals were a powerful display of control and order. In a world often chaotic and uncertain, the unyielding precision of the imperial morning demonstrated the emperor's ability to command and orchestrate every detail of his realm, down to the very rhythm of his breathing. You understand that this daily order was a microcosm of the order he imposed on his empire. Thirdly, they were political instruments. The privilege of access, of assisting the emperor, of being seen by him during these moments, was a currency of power. Courtiers vied for these positions, knowing that proximity translated into influence. You feel the subtle jostling for position, the silent competition, the desperate hope for a nod or a brief word from the monarch. Finally, these rituals created an emotional bond, a sense of shared purpose, however unequal. For the servants, from the lowest fire tender to the highest chamberlain, their lives were intertwined with the emperor's. Their dedication, their tireless efforts, were not just a job. They were a profound commitment, often passed down through generations. You can sense their pride, despite the grueling nature of their work, in being part of something so grand, so historically significant. So, as the sun finally rises higher, casting real light into the palace windows, you witness the culmination of this elaborate morning ritual. The emperor is fully dressed, his hair is perfect, he has consumed his breakfast, and he is ready to face the affairs of state. The dozens, perhaps hundreds, of courtiers who assisted in his rising now disperse to their own duties, carrying with them the political currents and personal fortunes shaped by that morning's interactions. The grand machinery of the court, however, does not stop. It has only just begun its daily operation. The dawn chorus of courtiers fades, but its melody of servitude, its intricate symphony of absolute power, will continue to play throughout the day, hour by hour, defining the very essence of imperial life. You have seen only the first notes of this colossal human orchestra, an orchestra whose every player, every instrument, every delicate sound, is dedicated entirely to the elevation of one individual. The imperial toilette, a grand production. You might imagine that after the grand morning spectacle of the imperial rising, the emperor could perhaps enjoy a moment of quiet, a brief reprieve from the constant scrutiny. You might envision him retreating to a private study, or perhaps strolling alone in a secluded garden, reflecting on the affairs of state, or simply enjoying the silent solitude that is so often denied to those who sit upon a throne. But you would be mistaken. For an emperor, especially in many of the great courts of history, the performance of sovereignty, the very act of existing as the supreme ruler, was an almost continuous production. Every gesture, every appearance, every aspect of his person, was not merely personal but political, symbolic, and utterly public. The imperial body itself was a stage, and its maintenance, its purification, its adornment, its presentation, was a complex, multi-act play unfolding throughout the day. You have witnessed the morning's grand beginning. Now let us turn our attention to another crucial, yet often more intimate, aspect of this imperial existence: the toilette. And when we speak of toilette in this context, we are not simply referring to a quick wash of the hands. No, this is an elaborate, sometimes hours-long ritual of cleansing, grooming, and perfuming, a grand production designed to uphold not just hygiene, but dignity, status, and perhaps even divine favor. It is a meticulous art, performed by a dedicated legion of specialized servants, each with their precise role in crafting the emperor's physical perfection. Imagine yourself now stepping into a different chamber of the palace, perhaps later in the morning, or even in the quiet hours of the afternoon, between state audiences and evening banquets. The air here is warmer, perhaps a little humid, carrying the faint, intriguing scent of various essences: rosewater, lavender, perhaps even musk or civet, blended with the clean, earthy aroma of warmed linens and polished wood. This is the bathing chamber, or a salon specifically designated for the emperor's personal care. It is not a place of stark utility, but one of comfort and quiet luxury. You see a massive bath, often carved from a single block of marble or alabaster, or perhaps a large, ornate copper basin, gleaming in the soft light filtering through a high window. It is clearly designed for a single, exalted individual. The water, sourced from distant springs or perhaps brought from a private, heated reservoir, is already being prepared. Attendants, moving with practiced grace and absolute silence, are carefully pouring in pitchers of steaming water, testing the temperature with a practiced hand, or perhaps with a specially designed thermometer if the era allows for such precision. You notice tiny porcelain vials and crystal bottles arranged neatly on a nearby table, containing bath salts, perfumed oils, and perhaps even finely ground herbs to soothe and invigorate the skin. A senior official, perhaps the Grand Chamberlain or the Master of the Robes, stands nearby, overseeing the meticulous preparations, ensuring every detail adheres to protocol, every drop is perfect. The emperor himself arrives, often escorted by a small retinue, but for this particular ritual, the numbers are slightly smaller than the morning lever. He is perhaps in a light, silken robe, his expression one of serene expectation. He entrusts his body, his very person, to these individuals, a trust born of countless years of tradition and unwavering loyalty. As he slowly descends into the warmed, scented water, the attendants spring into action. One, perhaps a bath valet, begins to gently wash his back with a soft sponge, perhaps made of sea natural sponges or finely woven linen. Another carefully cleans his feet, while a third may attend to his hair, pouring warmed, perfumed water over his scalp, gently massaging it with a delicate shampoo made from soapwort or other natural cleansers. The movements are slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic. There is no haste, only the measured rhythm of ancient ritual. You notice the quality of the implements. Not just simple brushes or towels, but items crafted with exquisite care. Combs of tortoiseshell or ivory, brushes with soft bristles set in precious metals, towels of the finest Egyptian cotton or Turkish linen, warmed on a brazier before being presented. Every touch, every application is precise. The purpose is not merely to clean, but to purify, to refresh, to invigorate the imperial body, preparing it for the next phase of its daily performance. It is a moment of vulnerability, yes, but also one of immense power, where the emperor's body is literally consecrated through the ministrations of his devoted court. Once the bathing is complete, the drying process is equally elaborate. Plush, warm towels are used to gently pat the emperor's skin, never rubbed vigorously. Then come the oils and lotions. A dedicated anointers, perhaps someone whose family has performed this role for generations, carefully applies fragrant emollients to his skin, ensuring it remains supple and smooth. These are not merely for scent. They are often believed to protect, to heal, to bestow good fortune. The air becomes even richer with a symphony of layered fragrances. The lingering scent of the bath water, the fresh notes of rose and jasmine from the lotions, and perhaps a faint undertone of more exotic spices. Next, you observe the intricate ritual of hair care. For many emperors across different cultures and eras, hair was a symbol of power, masculinity, or even divinity. It was never just hair. A specialized barber, perhaps the master of the imperial hair, approaches with a formidable array of tools. Combs, brushes, scissors, razors, curling irons heated over a small, controlled flame, all meticulously cleaned and polished. Depending on the era, the emperor's hair might be styled in elaborate braids, coiled into intricate knots, or carefully powdered with white or scented flour, reflecting the fashion of the day. If wigs were in vogue, this process involved fitting, adjusting, and styling the often enormous and elaborate perukes that denoted aristocratic status. The barber's hands move with absolute precision, each strand accounted for, each curl perfectly formed. It is a sculptural art, transforming natural hair into a coiffed masterpiece. You can almost feel the light pull on your scalp as the hair is sectioned, the gentle rasp of the comb, the soft puff of scented powder settling in the air. This is not a rush trim. This is a deliberate artistic endeavor, often taking a considerable amount of time, during which the emperor might receive reports, dictate letters, or simply sit in thoughtful silence, his presence still commanding the utmost reverence from the silent, attentive servants. Now, let us consider another vital yet often unmentioned aspect of the imperial toilette, the delicate matter of oral hygiene. Even in eras long before modern dentistry, the importance of a fresh breath and clean teeth was understood, especially for someone whose words carried the weight of empire. You see a small, specialized tray being presented. It contains finely carved toothpicks, often made of ivory, bone, or even gold. There might be small bowls of scented mouthwash, perhaps made from herbs steeped in wine or vinegar, or even a precursor to toothpaste, a fine powder made from crushed shells, herbs, or charcoal applied with a cloth or a finger. A specially appointed officer of the imperial mouth might assist, carefully checking for any issues, ensuring the emperor's breath is impeccable, his smile ready for public display. It is another small yet significant detail and the overall construction of imperial majesty. And then there is the matter of scent, which goes beyond bath oils and lotions. An emperor's scent was part of his aura, a signature of his presence. You witnessed the imperial perfumer approach, carrying a selection of exquisite phials. These might contain pure essential oils, floral waters, or complex blends created exclusively for the emperor. Perhaps a delicate dab behind the ears, a touch to the wrists, a spray onto the silken garments. The choice of scent could even be symbolic. Frankincense and myrrh for a more divine association, rose or jasmine for elegance, amber or musk for power and virility. The air in the chamber becomes a tapestry of beautiful, complex aromas, each carefully chosen to enhance the imperial presence. But no discussion of the imperial toilette would be complete or indeed truly immersive, without addressing the most private of human needs, one that for an emperor was almost never private: the call of nature. This is perhaps where the grand production of the imperial body truly reaches its zenith of ritualized strangeness. For the supreme ruler, even the act of relieving oneself was a state affair, attended by protocol, a specific hierarchy of servants and surprisingly sophisticated apparatus. You are now envisioning a slightly different scene, perhaps a small, enclosed space adjacent to the main imperial chambers, or even a specially designed portable commode brought directly to the emperor. This is not a simple outhouse or a common chamber pot. This is the imperial lavatory, or as it was sometimes called, the throne of ease. For rulers in places like China, the act of using the lavatory was often overseen by eunuchs, whose presence ensured both absolute discretion and absolute control. In other courts, specific chamberlains or valets had this most intimate of duties. The apparatus itself might be surprisingly elaborate. Imagine a beautifully carved wooden commode, perhaps inlaid with mother-of-pearl or precious metals, with a comfortable, padded seat. Beneath it would be a receptacle, sometimes lined with fragrant herbs, ash, or sand to absorb odors, and often carefully removed by a specific servant after use. Consider the level of attention. A servant would be there to offer assistance, perhaps providing warm cloths for cleansing, or a delicate spray of rosewater. The very act of attendance here emphasizes the emperor's complete dependence on his retinue, even for the most basic bodily functions. It underscores his status. He is so exalted that he does not even need to attend to his own needs. His body in all its aspects is cared for. The privacy we take for granted today simply did not exist for many rulers. Their lives were an open book, their bodies public property, and their waste was no exception. The throne of ease ritual was not just about waste management. It was about maintaining the emperor's person, ensuring comfort, and adhering to strict hygienic standards for the time. In some cultures, even the emperor's excrement might be examined by court physicians, providing clues about his health and well-being. This was not a moment of shame or discomfort, but rather another meticulously managed aspect of imperial health and control. The silence, the efficiency, the respectful demeanor of the attending servants in this most intimate setting would be absolute, a testament to their training and the deep understanding of their sacred duties. As this particular phase of the toilette concludes, you realize the sheer scope of this dedication. From the elaborate bath to the precise styling of hair, from the subtle application of perfume to the intimate attendance at the lavatory, every aspect of the emperor's physical self is a product of an elaborate human-powered machine. It speaks volumes about the perception of the monarch. He is not merely a man. He is an institution, a symbol, a living god or divine representative, and as such, his physical presentation must be nothing short of perfect. The motivations behind such extensive rituals are manifold. Firstly, there is health and hygiene. In times without modern medicine, maintaining cleanliness was crucial, especially for someone whose well-being was inextricably linked to the stability of an entire empire. A sick emperor was a vulnerable empire. Secondly, there is the undeniable element of power and status. To have dozens of people dedicated solely to your personal appearance, to have access to the most exotic perfumes and finest silks, to have every need anticipated and met, is the ultimate display of wealth and authority. It separates the emperor from every other mortal. Thirdly, these rituals are about control. By controlling the emperor's body, by placing it within a rigid framework of protocol and attendance, the court, and by extension the bureaucracy, asserts a subtle but powerful influence. Even in his most private moments, the emperor is never truly alone, never truly free from the watchful eyes and guiding hands of his retinue. This constant presence ensures continuity, tradition, and perhaps a degree of stability for the system itself. And finally, there is the symbolic dimension. The purification of the bath, the anointing with oils, the careful dressing and perfuming, all contribute to a sacred image. The emperor is not just clean, he is consecrated. He is not just well-groomed, he is presented as an icon. His appearance is a visual sermon, a silent declaration of his divine right to rule, his unbreakable connection to tradition, and his absolute supremacy over all others. As the final touches are applied, perhaps a touch of carefully selected jewelry, or a final adjustment to a ceremonial sash, you observe the emperor emerge from this intensely personal, yet deeply public, production. He is not just refreshed, he is transformed. He is ready to re-enter the main current of court life, radiating an aura of impeccable presentation, meticulously crafted by the hands of countless unseen servants. His skin gleams, his hair is perfect, he smells of exotic gardens, and his presence commands attention. The day continues, marked by these intricate transformations. The grand machinery of the court, which you first observed in the pre-dawn hours, never truly pauses. It merely shifts its focus, from the public rising to the intimate toilette, from the affairs of state to the subtle grooming of the sovereign's body. Each act, no matter how seemingly mundane, becomes a performance, a reaffirmation of the emperor's unique position at the very pinnacle of society. You have now gained a deeper insight into the incredible, almost unimaginable dedication required to maintain the imperial image, not just in broad strokes, but in every meticulous, scented, and ritualized detail. It is a world where the private is made public, where the personal is profoundly political, and where the most basic human needs are elevated into elaborate spectacles of power. And as the day progresses, other equally fascinating rituals will unfold, further illuminating the strange, captivating world of emperors and their devoted servants. The very air around the emperor is a tapestry woven from the countless gestures of those who serve him, a constant hum of activity, a ceaseless commitment to his comfort, his dignity, and his supreme authority. This is the unseen, unheard symphony of imperial life, playing on moment by moment. The ritual of nourishment, spoon-fed power. The ongoing tapestry of imperial life, that unseen and unheard symphony, continues its ceaseless rhythm, moment by moment. You have witnessed the intricate dances of purification and preparation, the meticulous tending to the emperor's physical and symbolic body. Now, as the day progresses, a more fundamental, deeply human need takes center stage, yet it too is elevated into an elaborate, awe-inspiring spectacle, the imperial meal. This is not simply sustenance. It is a profound declaration of power, a dangerous performance, and an intimate ritual conducted before an entire court. You might think of eating as a private, personal act, a moment of simple nourishment. But for the emperor, nothing is truly private. Every bite, every sip, every gesture at the dining table is imbued with meaning, a reaffirmation of his divine right and his absolute authority. Imagine yourself now, stepping into the periphery of this sacred space, feeling the palpable tension that permeates the air around a meal destined for the sovereign. Long before the emperor even contemplates hunger, the process begins in a sprawling complex of imperial kitchens, often miles away from his personal chambers. These are not mere cooking spaces. They are industrial-scale operations, bustling with hundreds, perhaps thousands of dedicated culinary artisans, each with a specific highly specialized role. You can almost smell the wood smoke, the simmering broths, the exotic spices wafting through the air. Hear the clang of copper pots, the rapid chopping of knives, the low murmurs of cooks under strict supervision. The procurement of ingredients alone is an epic undertaking. Only the finest, the freshest, the most exquisitely rare components are deemed worthy of the imperial palate. Imagine caravans traveling hundreds of miles to bring specific fruits that ripen only in distant provinces, or fishermen braving dangerous seas for a particular delicacy. Imperial farms and gardens are tended with unparalleled care, ensuring a continuous supply of perfect vegetables, herbs, and meats. Every item is scrutinized, weighed, sniffed, and deemed impeccable before it even enters the kitchen complex. Once inside, the real orchestration begins. The vast number of dishes prepared for a single imperial meal is staggering, sometimes numbering in the hundreds. This is not because the emperor will eat them all, but because the sheer abundance is a visual representation of his limitless wealth, his command over all resources, and his generosity. You might see a dedicated team responsible solely for rice, another for intricate pastry work, a third for roasting meats, and yet another for crafting delicate soups or exotic stews. Each dish is a masterpiece, prepared with a precision that borders on obsession. But beyond the culinary artistry lies a pervasive, ever-present fear: poison. The emperor's life is constantly under threat, and the dining table is a prime target for enemies, rivals, or disgruntled servants. Therefore, the security protocols surrounding imperial food preparation are incredibly elaborate and multi-layered. You can almost feel the paranoia in the air, a constant vigilance that never truly dissipates. From the moment an ingredient arrives, it is handled by a select few, often under constant surveillance. Once a dish is prepared, it undergoes rigorous testing. Imagine the poison tasters, often high-ranking eunuchs or trusted officials, whose very lives depend on their ability to detect any hint of malevolence. You might see them, stern-faced and silent, taking a small portion of each dish, waiting for several agonizing minutes for any adverse reaction before it can proceed to the next stage. This ritual of tasting is repeated multiple times along the food's journey, a desperate, silent prayer for the emperor's continued health and survival. When the moment for the meal finally arrives, the dishes are carefully transferred to exquisite serving vessels, often made of gold, silver, or priceless porcelain. Then begins the grand procession from the kitchens to the imperial dining hall. This is no hurried delivery. It is a slow, dignified march, a ceremonial parade of sustenance. You would hear the soft, rhythmic footsteps of dozens of palace servants, moving in perfect unison, each bearing a tray, a covered dish, or a delicate bowl. Guards, armed and vigilant, flank the procession, their eyes scanning every shadow, every face along the route. Silence is paramount, broken only by the soft rustle of silk and the occasional clink of metal. As the procession approaches the dining hall, the atmosphere inside shifts, becoming even more charged with anticipation. The imperial dining hall itself is a testament to opulence and symbolism. You step into a vast chamber, perhaps adorned with intricate tapestries depicting mythical beasts or scenes of imperial triumphs. The air is still, subtly scented with incense or the fragrance of carefully chosen flowers. Golden light from ornate lanterns or a multitude of candles illuminates the space, casting long, dramatic shadows. In the very center, or perhaps on a raised platform, sits the emperor's table. It is often a solitary affair, a stark reminder of his elevated, isolated position. Imagine the craftsmanship of the table itself, perhaps inlaid with precious stones, its surface gleaming. The imperial seat is more throne than chair, elaborately carved, draped in rich fabrics. Surrounding this central point are the countless smaller tables for high-ranking officials, family members, or favored guests, arranged in strict hierarchical order, each according to their rank and proximity to the divine center. But even their presence is often secondary, their meals a mere echo of the main event. When the emperor finally makes his entrance, a profound hush falls over the entire hall. You would feel the weight of countless eyes turning towards him, a collective breath held in reverence and apprehension. His arrival is met with deep bows and elaborate obeisances, further reinforcing his supreme status. He takes his place at the head of the table, not touching a thing, waiting for the ritual to unfold around him. And now the core of the segment's title comes to life, the ritual of spoon-fed power. The emperor does not serve himself. He does not even necessarily choose his own food directly. Instead, a retinue of specially selected, highly trained servants, often eunuchs or empresses' ladies-in-waiting, stands by ready to orchestrate every aspect of his meal. Imagine these servants, their movements fluid and precise, almost imperceptible. One might select a dish from the array before him, another might carefully transfer a portion onto a smaller, imperial plate. Then, with utmost delicacy and a steady hand, a trusted attendant might approach the emperor, often kneeling or bending low, and literally spoon-feed him. You witness this intimate, almost infantile act, transformed into a potent symbol of ultimate power. The emperor, the most powerful man in the realm, is so exalted, so sacred, that he need not even lift a hand to feed himself. It is a profound demonstration of his reliance on and command over his servants. This act of being fed carries multiple layers of meaning. It highlights the emperor's perceived fragility and preciousness, implying he is too important to perform such a mundane task. It also underscores the absolute subservience of those around him, their lives dedicated to his comfort and survival. You would observe the unwavering gaze of the attendant, their face devoid of emotion, their focus entirely on the emperor's lips, the precise angle of the spoon, the delicate transfer of food. Every movement is rehearsed, perfected, a silent ballet of service. The emperor might gesture subtly, a slight nod, a flicker of his eyes, to indicate his preference or disinterest. The servant must interpret these minute cues perfectly, anticipating his desires. A dish might be offered, a small taste provided, and if he rejects it, it is swiftly and silently removed. This rejection is not a slight against the cook. It is simply the emperor's prerogative, a demonstration of his absolute control, even over what he consumes. The symbolic weight of the meal extends beyond the act of feeding. The sheer abundance of food, often much more than any one person could ever consume, is a vivid display of imperial prosperity. It reassures the court and, by extension, the empire, that the emperor's reign is blessed with plenty. Each dish, often meticulously arranged to resemble landscapes or mythical creatures, is a temporary work of art, a fleeting masterpiece consumed in a moment. Furthermore, the foods themselves often carry symbolic meaning. Certain ingredients might be believed to enhance longevity, virility, or wisdom. The emperor's diet is often curated not just for taste, but for its perceived medicinal or auspicious properties, connecting his physical well-being to the health and fortune of the entire empire. His nourishment is not just for himself, it is for the stability and prosperity of his realm. Consider the psychological impact of such a meal. For the emperor, it is a moment of intense focus, a performance where every move is scrutinized. Despite the opulent surroundings and the constant service, there can be a profound loneliness to this experience. He is surrounded by people, yet utterly isolated by his position. He cannot truly relax, cannot simply enjoy a meal. It is a constant reminder of his unique, burdensome role. Every mouthful carries the silent question: is it safe? Is it perfect? Is it truly worthy of me? For the servants involved, the pressure is immense. Their lives, and often the lives of their families, hang in the balance. A mistake, a dropped dish, an incorrectly offered item, or worse, a detection of poison, could lead to severe punishment, even death. You can feel the tension emanating from them, a quiet hum of disciplined fear and unwavering loyalty. Their hands might be steady, their faces impassive, but beneath the surface lies a profound sense of responsibility. After the emperor has finished, often having eaten only a few morsels from the vast array, the meal is not simply cleared away. The remaining food, still abundant and exquisite, often becomes a further tool of power and patronage. Portions might be distributed to favored officials, family members, or members of the guard. This act of sharing the emperor's leftovers is a highly coveted privilege, a tangible symbol of royal favor, reinforcing hierarchical bonds and loyalty. To receive food from the emperor's table is to be blessed, to share in his power and good fortune. This further emphasizes the economic and symbolic control the emperor exercises, even over the remnants of his meal. While the specifics varied across different empires and historical periods, the core ritual remained consistent. In ancient China, imperial banquets were legendary for their scale, involving thousands of dishes and hundreds of servers. In the opulent courts of Europe, even when monarchs self-fed, the elaborate ceremonies, the presence of tasters, and the symbolic display of wealth were central to the dining experience. Imagine the French Sun King Louis XIV eating in public, his every gesture observed by dozens of courtiers, transforming a simple meal into a grand public spectacle, a reaffirmation of his divine majesty. You can almost hear the whispered conversations, the rustle of silk as people jostle for a better view. Even the simple act of choosing a beverage or taking a sip of water is orchestrated with similar precision. A designated servant might offer a cup, perhaps after it too has been tasted for safety. The emperor drinks, not from a simple glass, but from a jeweled goblet, further elevating the mundane to the majestic. The entire process, from the first ingredient chosen to the last dish cleared, is a tightly choreographed performance, designed to reinforce the emperor's unparalleled status. This intricate dance around nourishment underscores a fundamental truth of imperial life. Nothing is left to chance, and no human need is too basic to be leveraged as a symbol of power. The very act of eating, an essential requirement for survival, becomes a deliberate, ritualized statement of dominance and control. You have now peered into another carefully constructed facet of the imperial world, where the spoon that feeds the emperor is not merely an utensil, but a conduit of authority, a silent declaration of his absolute, unchallenged rule. The emperor's digestion, his well-being, his very breath after this elaborate meal, are all considered matters of state. His nourishment is intrinsically linked to the stability of the empire itself, making every bite a politically charged event. This dedication to his physical being, this meticulous attendance to his basic human functions, transforms the ruler from a mere mortal into a living deity, sustained not just by food, but by the relentless, unwavering devotion of an entire system built to serve and glorify him. And as the day continues, yet more rituals equally profound and equally telling will unfold, further illuminating the incredible, almost unimaginable lengths to which empires went to solidify and display their power. Whispers and protocol, the art of the royal audience. The day moves on, the empire's heart beating to an intricate rhythm, and the display of power shifts from the intimate dining chamber to the grander, yet no less controlled, setting of the imperial audience. You are now standing at the threshold of a chamber where power is not merely exercised, but dramatically performed, where every gesture, every whispered word, every angle of a bow holds immense weight. This is where the ruler meets his world, not as an equal, but as the unchallengeable center around which all else revolves. Imagine the sheer vastness of the space before you. You approach down a long, echoing hall, perhaps paved with polished stone or gleaming marble, reflecting the filtered light from high windows. The air itself feels different here, heavy with anticipation, perhaps scented faintly with incense or the aged fragrance of priceless tapestries that line the walls, depicting battles won or mythical heroes. Your footsteps, carefully measured, resonate in the silence. You are not alone, of course. Attendants, officials, guards, all stand motionless, their gazes fixed forward, their presence a silent testimony to the solemnity of the occasion. They are part of the scenery, part of the living architecture of power. You notice the details, the intricate carvings on the doors, the subtle gleam of gold leaf, the way the light catches a particular thread in a banner. Each element is designed to impress, to diminish, to prepare you for the singular presence at the chamber's heart. This is not simply a room, it is a stage meticulously set for the display of absolute authority. Your own attire, carefully chosen and inspected, feels almost insignificant against this backdrop of orchestrated grandeur. As you draw closer, you begin to discern the structure of the antechamber, the series of waiting rooms, each more exclusive than the last. You have already passed through several layers of screening, your credentials meticulously checked, your purpose confirmed, your very presence here a testament to a long journey through bureaucratic mazes. Each of these rooms imposes its own quiet reverence. Here you might wait for hours, perhaps even days, sharing the space with others who have also traversed the complex network of court life to stand here. They are envoys from distant lands, generals awaiting new orders, ministers seeking counsel, petitioners with urgent pleas. Yet no one speaks above a whisper. The air hums with unspoken protocols, a silent agreement that volume and haste have no place in this sanctified space. The officials who guide you are themselves masters of this silent language. Their movements are precise, their expressions impassive. They communicate through subtle gestures, a slight incline of the head, a hand indicating a direction, a quiet but firm reminder of a particular rule of etiquette. You watch others, internalizing their movements, learning the silent dance that precedes an audience. You observe how they hold themselves, the respectful distance they maintain, the way their eyes subtly avoid direct contact with anyone of higher rank, reserving that honor only for the emperor himself. Finally, the moment arrives. A heavy door, perhaps adorned with gilded symbols of imperial power, swings inward silently, seemingly without human intervention. A guard, clad in ceremonial armor, stands perfectly still to one side. You are beckoned forward, your heart perhaps beating a little faster, despite all the careful preparation. You step into the audience chamber itself. The vastness here is even more pronounced. The air is still, almost hushed. Your gaze is immediately drawn to the far end, to a raised dais, bathed in a focused, almost ethereal light. And there, upon a throne of unparalleled splendor, sits the emperor. His figure is often framed by rich curtains or an elaborate screen, further enhancing his iconic presence. His regalia is breathtaking. You see the deep, rich colors of his robes, perhaps embroidered with gold or silver thread depicting celestial beings or symbols of prosperity and power. On his head, a crown or an elaborate headdress, gleaming with precious jewels, catches the light. His posture is regal, unmoving, his expression often serene, almost detached. He is not merely a man. He is the embodiment of the state, a living symbol, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. As you advance, you do so according to strict rules. You do not walk directly towards him, but perhaps along a prescribed path, a central aisle bordered by silent courtiers. Your steps are slow, deliberate, each one a testament to your deference. You are acutely aware of the distance between you and the throne, a physical manifestation of the immense chasm in status. As you reach a certain point, perhaps marked by a particular inlay in the floor or a small pillar, you perform the required obeisance. This might be a deep bow, a prostration where your forehead touches the ground, or a series of carefully choreographed genuflections. The form is specific, unchanging, and absolute. You remain in this posture, head bowed, until a signal is given, perhaps a soft cough from a high official, or a faint, almost imperceptible gesture from one of the emperor's immediate attendants. Only then are you permitted to slowly rise, though your gaze remains fixed downwards, or perhaps directed no higher than the emperor's feet. To look directly into his eyes unless specifically invited would be an act of profound disrespect, an unpardonable breach of protocol. Now the communication begins. But it is not a conversation in the way you might understand it. You are not there to engage in a back-and-forth dialogue. You are there to present, to submit, to receive. If you are a messenger, you will relay your message in the most concise, formalized language possible, using honorifics and deferential phrases that have been passed down through generations. Your voice will be carefully modulated, neither too loud nor too soft, avoiding any hint of emotion or urgency that might be deemed inappropriate. Often you do not even address the emperor directly. Your words are directed to an intermediary, perhaps a grand vizier, a chief minister, or a eunuch of high rank who stands closer to the throne. This intermediary then relays your words, often subtly rephrased or summarized, to the emperor. The emperor might respond with a brief, almost imperceptible nod, or a single word or a simple gesture. That response, in turn, is relayed back to you by the intermediary, perhaps elaborated upon or interpreted. This system of indirect communication serves to further elevate the emperor, placing him beyond the need for direct, mundane interaction. It maintains an aura of untouchable authority, a distance that reinforces his divine or semi-divine status. The substance of your petition or report might be of great import to you, perhaps even to the empire itself. Yet, the ritual ensures that it is framed within the strictures of imperial power. You are not there to argue or persuade in the conventional sense, but to present your case within a predefined framework of reverence and submission. The emperor's decision, once communicated, is final and absolute. There is no appeal, no negotiation. Consider the psychological impact of this ritual, both on you as the supplicant and on the emperor himself. For you, it is an experience of profound humility, a reminder of your place within the vast hierarchy of the empire. Every element is designed to impress upon you the absolute power wielded by the figure on the throne. Your own desires, fears, and hopes are dwarfed by the sheer weight of imperial authority. The success of your mission might depend not just on the validity of your request, but on your perfect adherence to this intricate dance of submission. A single misstep, a forgotten phrase, a clumsy movement could spell disaster. For the emperor, these audiences are not just about receiving information or issuing commands. They are continuous, living demonstrations of his power. Every bow, every lowered gaze, every carefully chosen word reinforces his position, not just in the eyes of the supplicants, but in the eyes of his own court and, by extension, in the eyes of the entire empire. He rarely needs to speak at length, for his very presence, his silent majesty, his effortless command of such elaborate protocol, speaks volumes. His authority is woven into the fabric of the air, into the silence, into the hushed movements of everyone present. Think about the sheer number of people involved in maintaining this intricate ballet. The chamberlains who oversee the protocol, the heralds who announce arrivals, the scribes who record the proceedings, the guards who ensure order, the courtiers who merely stand as silent witnesses. Each has a specific role honed over generations, to contribute to the seamless execution of this daily performance of power. The smallest detail is accounted for. The precise angle of a banner, the exact position of a cushion, the timing of a gong. Nothing is left to chance, for any deviation could be interpreted as a weakening of imperial control. The length of an audience is often remarkably brief. A few moments, a swift exchange of words through an intermediary, a nod of acknowledgement. Then, just as silently as you were admitted, you are dismissed. You retreat, performing the same ritualistic bows and genuflections as you back away from the throne, never turning your back to the emperor until you have passed the threshold of the door. The experience, though brief, leaves a lasting impression. It is not just a meeting, it is an encounter with the living embodiment of an entire political and spiritual system. As you step back into the antechamber, the heavy door closing behind you with a soft, resonant thud, the outside world seems a little different. The sunlight perhaps feels brighter, the sounds of the palace grounds more distinct. You carry with you not just the emperor's decision, but the palpable weight of his presence, the undeniable reality of his authority. The ritual has done its work. It has reaffirmed your place, his place, and the unchanging order of the empire. This is the art of the royal audience, a meticulously choreographed performance that transcends mere communication. It is a fundamental pillar of imperial governance, a constant reinforcement of the social and political hierarchy. It transforms what could be a simple meeting into a sacred event, where the ruler is elevated to an almost divine status, and those who approach him are reminded of their profound deference. The whispers in the chamber are not just words. They are the murmurs of an empire confirming its allegiance, its fear, and its unwavering submission to the figure on the throne. The silence, the strictures, the layered mediation all contribute to this effect. They ensure that the emperor remains an enigma, a figure of awe rather than familiarity. He is distant not just physically but emotionally and psychologically. This distance fosters respect, sometimes fear, and always a profound sense of his exalted position. You leave not with a casual familiarity, but with a reinforced understanding of the immense, almost cosmic scale of his power. This daily ritual, enacted in countless courts across centuries and continents, serves as a powerful reminder that an empire's strength is not solely in its armies or its wealth, but in the minds of its subjects. It is in their belief in the emperor's legitimacy, in the divine right or mandate he claims. And these audiences, with their strict protocol and awe-inspiring grandeur, are one of the most effective tools for cultivating and maintaining that belief. They are a constant, living testament to the truth of the imperial narrative. The energy expended on such rituals, the resources dedicated to their flawless execution, are immense. Consider the intricate craftsmanship of the throne, the robes, the ceremonial weapons carried by the guards, the architectural splendor of the chamber itself. These are not mere decorations. They are symbols carefully chosen and imbued with meaning, designed to communicate power and permanence. Every thread, every stone, every polished surface contributes to the overall message, that this rule is ancient, enduring, and unchallengeable. Even the simplest request becomes monumental when filtered through this process. A messenger reporting on a provincial harvest, a minister requesting funds for a public works project, a general seeking reinforcements, all must navigate this labyrinth of protocol. Their concerns, however vital, are secondary to the preservation of the ritual itself, to the reaffirmation of the imperial hierarchy. The method of communication is as important as the message itself. You might wonder then how true communication, how honest advice, could ever penetrate such a carefully constructed veil of deference. And indeed, this was one of the perennial challenges for emperors throughout history. To maintain their godlike aura while still being informed of the realities of their vast domains. The system itself, while solidifying power, also created barriers. Trustworthy advisors, those few individuals allowed a degree of greater proximity or a more direct line of communication, became invaluable. Their role was often to filter, to interpret, and sometimes to risk the emperor's displeasure by delivering unvarnished truths, all while still adhering to the fundamental principles of deference. The royal audience is therefore a microcosm of the entire imperial system. It embodies the structure of power, the flow of authority, the values of loyalty and obedience, and the elaborate mechanisms used to maintain control. It is a spectacle, a sacred rite, and a deeply ingrained practice that shapes the very consciousness of those who participate in it. You have not just observed a historical event. You have, for a fleeting moment, been a part of it, experiencing the controlled reverence, the silent power, and the profound majesty that define the art of the royal audience. This intricate dance of deference and authority continues to resonate, even as the day inexorably progresses towards its end, each moment a new opportunity to display and cement the unyielding power of the emperor. The intricate dance of deference and authority you just observed within the audience hall was merely one expression of a far more pervasive and totalizing system. It was a fragment, a single highly charged scene in a continuous, elaborate performance that defined life within an imperial court. Here, every movement, every posture, every glance, was not merely a personal choice but a precisely orchestrated act, a syllable in the grand language of power. You are now stepping beyond the audience chamber into the broader realm of the palace, where the very act of living was transformed into a sacred, ritualized choreography. Imagine yourself as a courtier moving through these hallowed halls. Your training began long before you ever set foot within the inner precincts. You learn not just what to say but how to stand, how to sit, how to walk, how to breathe. The most mundane actions of daily life, stripped of spontaneity, became deeply significant, imbued with layers of meaning, each one a silent affirmation of the emperor's absolute sovereignty. This was not just etiquette, it was a way of being, a constant, conscious performance of your place within the cosmic order. Consider, for example, the simple act of walking. You do not stride freely with the casual swing of your arms and the natural rhythm of your gait. Oh no. Within these imperial corridors, your walk is a statement. Your pace is slow, measured, almost gliding. Your feet are placed deliberately, one after the other, perhaps never quite lifting fully from the polished stone or lacquered wood. This ensures a quiet passage, a subtle humility that announces your presence without demanding attention. Each step is an exercise in control, a suppression of the impulsive, the personal. Your posture is unwavering. Your back is straight, your shoulders held just so, not stiffly, but with a cultivated grace that suggests perpetual readiness, a contained energy. Your head is held high, yet your gaze is not permitted to wander freely, to inspect the curiosities of the palace walls or to meet the eyes of others with casual familiarity. Instead, your eyes are often cast downwards, or directed with a fixed, almost deferential focus on the path immediately ahead, avoiding any hint of idle curiosity or challenging scrutiny. This disciplined gaze communicates respect, an understanding that your attention belongs not to the distractions of the world, but to the grave matters of the court and ultimately to the emperor. The speed of your walk itself is a profound indicator of status and intention. A quick pace might suggest urgency, but also a lack of decorum, an impetuousness unsuitable for such sacred spaces. A very slow, almost imperceptible shuffle, however, might signal extreme deference, a courtier of lower rank approaching a superior, or perhaps someone bearing ill tidings, reluctant to deliver them. The most powerful courtiers, those closest to the emperor, might adopt a stately, deliberate tempo, conveying authority and confidence, yet still maintaining the court's characteristic serenity. You learn to read these subtle variations in gait, to understand the unspoken language of footsteps echoing down the long, silent galleries. Then there is the art of bowing and prostration. This is not a simple nod of the head. This is a complex, multi-stage ritual, each stage fraught with symbolic weight. Imagine approaching the emperor or a very high-ranking minister in his stead. You might first perform a shallow bow, a simple inclination of the head and shoulders, a gesture of polite acknowledgement. But for the emperor, or in moments of profound reverence, the demand is far greater. You might begin with a deep bow, bending at the waist so that your torso forms a 90-degree angle, your eyes fixed on the floor before you. Your hands might be clasped together or placed flat against your thighs, never allowed to dangle freely. You hold this position not for a fleeting second, but for a prescribed duration, allowing the silence to stretch, emphasizing the weight of your deference. The physical effort itself is part of the ritual, a testament to your submission. But often even this is not enough. For the most sacred moments, for the granting of extraordinary favors, or for expressions of ultimate fealty, you perform the kowtow, a full prostration. You sink to your knees carefully without haste. Your hands, perhaps palms down, are then placed on the floor before you. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, you lower your forehead to touch the ground. Your entire body is humbled, your face pressed against the cold stone or fine carpet, completely vulnerable, completely submitted. This is not a casual gesture. It is an act of total self-abnegation. You might be required to remain in this position for an extended period, perhaps for minutes, your muscles aching, the blood rushing to your head. The air you breathe is the dusty scent of the floor. You rise only when commanded, and you do so with the same measured grace with which you descended, never rushing, never showing undue haste. The number of repetitions might also be specified. 3 bows and 9 prostrations, for example, each one a precise act of devotion. You learn to execute these movements flawlessly, for any error, any sign of awkwardness or disrespect, could be interpreted as insubordination with potentially dire consequences. The ground beneath you suddenly feels less like a floor and more like a stage for existential performance. And what about simply standing or sitting? These two are governed by an invisible code. To stand in the emperor's presence is to adopt a pose of attentive stillness. You might stand for hours, unmoving, a statue of devoted service. Your weight is evenly distributed, your hands clasped before you or hanging respectfully at your sides, never placed in pockets, never used to scratch an itch or adjust a garment. Any fidgeting, any shifting of weight, any visible sign of discomfort, is a failing, a breach of decorum that betrays a lack of discipline and respect. You are a sentinel, alert, yet perfectly composed, your inner world suppressed for the sake of outward order. Seating, on the other hand, is a privilege, not a right. Very few are permitted to sit in the emperor's presence, and those who are occupy specific, designated positions. The height of your seat, its proximity to the throne, its material all communicate your rank. Perhaps you are granted a low stool while another, higher-ranking official has a cushioned chair. The emperor, of course, sits on the most elaborate, highest throne, physically elevated above all others, a living embodiment of his divine mandate. You would never cross your legs, lean back, or slouch. Your posture, even seated, remains formal, your attention directed towards the emperor, your body language perpetually poised for service. Even the smallest gestures are meticulously choreographed. How do you hand an object to a superior? Never with a single hand, casually extended. Instead, you use both hands, offering it with a slight bow, your eyes downcast, as if the object itself were imbued with the emperor's sacredness. You do not point with an outstretched finger, that is too aggressive, too direct. Instead, you might indicate with an open hand or a subtle tilt of the head. Your hands themselves are objects of constant attention. They are not to be tucked away, nor allowed to flail expressively. They are extensions of your respectful self, always controlled, always aware of their place. The act of speaking, too, is more than just the articulation of words. Your voice must be carefully modulated. Never too loud, lest it seem aggressive or presumptuous. Never too soft, lest it be interpreted as hesitant or lacking conviction. Your tone is respectful, your words chosen with precision, avoiding colloquialisms or casual turns of phrase. You speak only when addressed, and your responses are concise, direct, and deferential. Long-windedness is a sign of self-importance. Brevity is a mark of wisdom and humility. You learn to listen far more than you speak, and when you do speak, it is with the utmost deliberation, each syllable weighed for its appropriate impact. Consider the simple act of entering or exiting a room, especially one where the emperor or a high official resides. You do not just open a door and walk in. The sequence is precise. You approach the entrance with your measured steps. You might pause, waiting for a signal, a subtle nod from a guard or a silent attendant. When permitted, you open the door slowly, just wide enough to slip through, perhaps using both hands to avoid any jarring noise. You enter, taking a few more measured steps, then turn and gently close the door behind you, ensuring it latches silently. You then perform the appropriate bow or prostration, depending on the status of those present and the significance of your entry. Exiting is a mirror image, a graceful retreat, never turning your back completely on the most senior figure, often backing away for a few paces before turning fully. This slow, deliberate ballet of entry and exit reinforces the sanctity of the space and the reverence due to those within. Even the silent servants, the eunuchs, the palace guards, the ladies-in-waiting, move with a choreographed grace. Their movements are often nearly imperceptible, a quiet ballet of service. They anticipate needs, appear and disappear like shadows, their presence felt more than seen. A cup of tea might be brought forward on a tray, both hands supporting it, presented at the perfect height, then retrieved with the same quiet efficiency. Robes are adjusted, cushions are fluffed, messages are conveyed, all with an economy of motion and a profound respect for the stillness of the imperial presence. Their very existence within the court is defined by their precision, their seamless integration into the grand performance. What then is the purpose of this relentless, all-encompassing choreography? Why this transformation of every human action into a ritualized gesture? Firstly, it is a powerful display of hierarchy. Every single movement you make, every step you take, every bow you execute, visually and physically reinforces your exact position within the social order. The more constrained your movements, the more elaborate your gestures of deference, the lower your rank relative to the person you are interacting with. It creates a living, breathing chart of power, understood by all, instantly recognizable. Secondly, it is an exercise in control and discipline. To live within such a system requires immense self-control. You must constantly monitor your body, your gaze, your voice, your every impulse. This constant self-awareness, this suppression of natural human inclination, instills a profound sense of discipline. It trains courtiers to be extensions of the imperial will, capable of executing commands with precision and without question. It transforms individual will into collective obedience. Thirdly, it elevates the emperor to a sacred, almost divine status. If every interaction with him or within his presence is a sacred act, then he himself becomes the focal point of that sacredness. His person is not merely a ruler. He is the embodiment of cosmic order, the center around which the entire universe of the court revolves. Your ritualized movements are not just respect for a man, but reverence for a concept, an ideal, a divine power manifest on earth. The psychological impact on you, the courtier, is profound. You live in a state of perpetual awareness, constantly self-monitoring. Every movement is scrutinized, every facial expression, every subtle shift of weight. The fear of making a mistake, of breaching decorum, can be immense. An error might not just lead to embarrassment but to loss of favor, demotion, or even worse consequences. This constant pressure can create an atmosphere of anxiety, but also one of heightened focus, a sharpened sensitivity to the nuances of power dynamics. You become exquisitely attuned to the unspoken, the subtle cues, the atmospheric shifts that signal approval or displeasure. Physically, too, there is a toll. The long hours of standing perfectly still, the repeated deep bows, the awkward postures required by certain rituals, the discomfort of elaborate, restrictive court attire, all contribute to a constant physical strain. Your body becomes an instrument, trained and disciplined, but often pushed to its limits. Yet, to complain, to show any sign of weakness or fatigue, would be another failing. Endurance itself is a virtue, a silent testament to your unwavering dedication. For the emperor, this elaborate choreography serves multiple vital purposes. It constantly reinforces his authority, not just through abstract laws, but through the lived experience of everyone in his court. He is surrounded by a living tableau of deference, a perpetual ballet of submission. It reminds him and all who observe of his absolute power, his unquestionable right to rule. It creates an aura of majesty and mystery around him, making him seem larger than life, almost beyond human. Moreover, this ritualized movement acts as a filter. Those who cannot master the choreography, who lack the self-control, the discipline, or the understanding of its profound symbolism, will inevitably be weeded out. Only the most dedicated, the most adaptable, the most politically astute, will rise within such a system. It is a constant, subtle test of loyalty and capability. Imagine the sheer aesthetic impact of such a court. It moves at a different rhythm, a slower, more deliberate cadence than the outside world. The hallways are not filled with scurrying feet or boisterous laughter. Instead, you hear the soft rustle of silk, the faint whisper of footsteps, the muted tones of respectful conversation. It is a world of controlled elegance, of serene dignity, an almost theatrical presentation of power. The human form itself, within this context, becomes an artistic medium for the expression of imperial might. Across diverse cultures, from the Forbidden City of China to the courts of Versailles and the Ottoman Seraglio, the principles of this choreography remained remarkably consistent. In China, the kowtow was paramount, a practice so deeply ingrained that even foreign emissaries were often compelled to perform it, sometimes sparking international incidents. The precise angle of the bow, the number of repetitions, the accompanying verbal formula, all were meticulously codified, passed down through generations of court officials. The very layout of the palace, with its series of gates and courtyards, dictated a linear progression, a ritualized journey towards the imperial presence, each step designed to heighten anticipation and reverence. In the Sun King's court at Versailles, every aspect of Louis XIV's day, from his awakening, the levee, to his retiring, the Cauchi, was a public ritual performed before an audience of privileged courtiers. The right to merely hold the king's shirt or to hand him his dressing gown was a coveted honor, a point of fierce competition. These were not just practical acts. They were meticulously choreographed ceremonies, where the king himself was the central performer, and his courtiers, by their perfectly executed attendance and deferential movements, formed his supporting cast. The speed at which one walked away from the king's presence, the direction one faced, the order of precedence in a doorway, all were governed by unyielding rules that left no room for improvisation. In the Ottoman court, the Sultan might observe his divan, the imperial council, from behind a screened window, his presence unseen but intensely felt. His viziers and other officials would perform elaborate bows and prostrations, their movements precise and synchronized, aware that the Sultan's unseen gaze was upon them, judging their every action. The mute servants, often eunuchs, communicated through a complex sign language, their silent movements adding another layer of hushed, disciplined grace to the palace's atmosphere. Even when bearing vital messages, their steps were measured, their expressions neutral, their very bodies subservient to the strictures of court protocol. You, as a participant in this historical immersion, can feel the constant tension, the relentless demand for perfection. You are aware of your body in a way you never are in your own time, every muscle a potential betrayer of your carefully constructed facade of deference. You understand that this is not just about avoiding punishment. It is about belonging, about succeeding, about surviving within a system where your worth is measured by your unwavering adherence to an unspoken, yet universally understood code of conduct. This is the choreography of the court, a living, breathing ballet of power and submission, where every step is a sacred act, every posture a prayer of loyalty, and every moment a reaffirmation of the emperor's unyielding authority. It is a world where the body itself becomes a canvas for the display of absolute rule, a testament to the profound lengths to which human beings will go to establish and maintain order, hierarchy, and a sense of divine purpose. The air around you hums with this unseen energy, this constant, meticulous performance. It is a beautiful, terrifying, and utterly captivating spectacle, designed to impress, to intimidate, and above all, to control, transforming the very essence of human interaction into an art form of power. Then there were the more intimate forms of entertainment. Perhaps a game of chess or a complex board game, played in a quiet chamber. Even these moments of seemingly simple recreation were fraught with unspoken rules. The emperor would play not merely for amusement, but to exercise his intellect, to demonstrate his strategic thinking. His opponents, often favored courtiers, walked a perilous tightrope. They must play well enough to challenge, to make the game engaging, but never so well as to humiliate the emperor, never to make him feel less than supreme. A well-placed compliment on his brilliant move, a subtle error that allows him to triumph, these were the delicate arts of playing games with a sovereign. The stakes were not merely the game itself, but the favor, or indeed, the displeasure, of the realm's most powerful individual. Consider the feasts and banquets. These were perhaps the most lavish and multi-sensory forms of imperial entertainment. You smell the rich aromas wafting from the imperial kitchens, an army of chefs working tirelessly to produce dishes of astonishing variety and complexity. Each course is a work of art, presented with ceremonial precision. Food itself becomes a medium for display, exotic ingredients procured at immense cost, culinary techniques honed over generations. But it is not just the food. The entire dining experience is a performance. You see the procession of servers, moving with synchronized grace, their footsteps silent on the opulent carpets. Each dish is announced, its ingredients sometimes described, its origin celebrated. The vessels are crafted from gold, silver, jade, or exquisite porcelain, reflecting the emperor's boundless wealth. Musicians play softly in the background, dancers perform between courses, and poets recite verses celebrating the emperor's glory or the bounty of his empire. The seating arrangements, the order of toasts, the precise etiquette of consumption, all are carefully orchestrated. Your place at the table, your proximity to the emperor, the type of food you are permitted to eat, all of these communicate your status within the rigid hierarchy of the court. Even the conversation is guided, with topics deemed appropriate for imperial ears, and laughter, when it occurs, must be measured and respectful. You are not simply eating, you are participating in a grand culinary ritual, a celebration of imperial power and generosity. And what about the gardens? Imperial gardens were not just spaces of natural beauty, they were meticulously curated landscapes, designed as living theaters for imperial pleasure. You walk along winding paths, past meticulously pruned trees, artificial mountains, and serene ponds stocked with colorful fish. Exotic birds, housed in ornate aviaries, sing their melodic tunes. Every rock, every stream, every flower is placed with deliberate intent, often reflecting philosophical principles or symbolic meanings important to the emperor. These gardens provided settings for poetry readings, quiet contemplation, or even intimate gatherings. Sometimes rare and exotic animals brought from distant lands would roam in specially designated enclosures, a living testament to the empire's reach and the emperor's ability to command wonders. The construction and maintenance of these gardens required unimaginable resources and an army of gardeners, landscapers, and artisans, all dedicated to creating an idealized natural world, perfectly controlled and ordered, a microcosm of the emperor's domain. For the emperor, these spaces were sanctuaries, but even here the unspoken rules of the court lingered. The beauty was created for his enjoyment, and any imperfection, any deviation from the pristine order, could bring swift and severe consequences for those responsible. The tranquility of the garden was a fragile construct, maintained by vigilance and fear. The constant pressure on those tasked with curating imperial entertainment was immense. Imagine you are a chief eunuch, or a master of ceremonies, responsible for ensuring the emperor's satisfaction. Your career, your very life, depends on your ability to anticipate his moods, to discern his desires, to flawlessly execute every detail. You must possess an encyclopedic knowledge of all available talent, an exquisite sense of timing, and an unwavering commitment to perfection. The search for novelty was perpetual. An emperor's boredom was a dangerous thing, often leading to capricious decisions, to the sudden disfavor of once favored courtiers, or even to the downfall of entire factions. You must constantly seek out new performers, invent new forms of amusement, surprise the imperial palate with unprecedented dishes, or unveil unheard of spectacles. This required a vast network of scouts, emissaries dispatched to the farthest corners of the empire, searching for unique talents, rare animals, or innovative ideas that might briefly capture the imperial imagination. The stress of this pursuit is palpable. You see the subtle lines of worry etched around the eyes of the palace manager responsible for the emperor's dinner, the frantic whispered consultations between the musicians before a performance, the almost imperceptible tremor in the hand of a dancer as she awaits her cue. They are not merely performing, they are perpetually on trial, their worth and survival hanging in the balance with every note, every step, every word. The rewards for success, however, could be equally immense. A single laugh from the emperor, a gesture of appreciation, could elevate a family, bestow riches, or grant immense influence. A favored entertainer might receive lavish gifts, exemption from certain duties, or even a privileged position within the court hierarchy. Their art, honed through years of sacrifice, was their currency, their only path to distinction and security in a world where everything revolved around the supreme ruler. You have witnessed the unspoken language of the court, the ballet of power in every gesture and glance. Now turn your gaze to another facet of this meticulously sculpted existence, the emperor's leisure. For even in moments of intended diversion, the imperial court remains a stage and every pleasure a performance. It is a spectacle curated with an intensity that borders on obsession, designed not merely to entertain but to reaffirm, to display, to control. Imagine you are a fly on the wall, or perhaps a particularly observant courtier, as the day draws to a close. The heavy silk curtains are drawn against the fading light, but the air within the imperial apartments is not one of quiet repose. Instead, a different kind of energy crackles, a subtle anticipation of the evening's delights. These are not casual pleasures spontaneously arranged. Oh no. The emperor's amusement is a state affair, a finely tuned machine operated by an army of dedicated servants, each a master of their craft, each aware that their performance, however subtle, contributes to the grand tapestry of imperial power. You might think of entertainment as a break from duty, a release from the rigid formality. But for the emperor and for those who served him, even pleasure was a duty. It was a ritualized act, imbued with symbolism and expectation. Consider the musicians, for example. You might hear the distant ethereal strains of a zither, or the powerful thrumming of a drum, echoing through the vast halls. These are not ordinary players. They are artists chosen for their flawless technique, their profound understanding of mood and melody. They have undergone years of rigorous training, their fingers calloused, their voices perfected, all to produce the precise auditory landscape the emperor desires. Their lives are dedicated to the pursuit of sonic perfection, to crafting harmonies that soothe an imperial mind, or stirring rhythms that ignite an imperial spirit. Their instruments, too, are often works of art, inlaid with precious stones, carved from rare woods, symbols of the wealth and artistry at the emperor's command. When they play, you observe the precise choreography of their movements, the bowing of their heads, the subtle shifts in their posture, all part of the performance. They are not simply making music, they are offering a sonic tribute, a carefully constructed soundscape designed to transport or calm, to elevate or inspire. Their very presence, their disciplined artistry, speaks volumes about the emperor's discerning taste and limitless resources. Then there are the dancers. You see them glide into the imperial chamber, perhaps veiled in shimmering silks, their movements fluid as water, precise as clockwork. Their performances tell stories, myths of gods and heroes, or allegories of nature and conquest. Every step, every hand gesture, every turn of the head is rehearsed countless times, polished to an exquisite sheen. Their faces, though often serene or dramatically expressive, conceal the years of discipline, the hours spent perfecting a single pose, the aching muscles, the unwavering focus required to achieve such grace. They are not simply moving bodies, they are living sculptures, animated by imperial will, designed to captivate the eye and transport the imagination. The costumes themselves are a spectacle. Elaborate headdresses, layers of embroidered fabric, jewels that catch the light with every sway. These are not costumes designed for comfort, but for effect, for the dramatic impact they have on the imperial gaze. And as you watch, you understand that these dancers are not performing for a general audience. They are performing for one singular individual. Their success or failure rests entirely on the emperor's reaction, a subtle nod, a slight smile, or perhaps an imperceptible frown that could spell their doom. The air is thick with their silent plea for approval, their desperate desire to please. Beyond music and dance, the imperial court often indulged in theatrical performances. Imagine elaborate puppet shows with intricate figures brought to life by unseen hands, telling tales of morality or conquest. Or perhaps a troupe of acrobats, their bodies bending and twisting in gravity-defying feats, eliciting gasps of awe. Storytellers, their voices rich and modulated, would weave narratives of ancient heroes or distant lands, captivating the emperor with their eloquence. These performances were more than mere entertainment. They were often didactic, reinforcing cultural values, historical narratives, or even subtly conveying political messages, all wrapped in the guise of amusement. You might find yourself observing the preparations for a grand hunt. This is not a simple excursion into the wilderness. Oh no. Imperial hunts were vast, meticulously organized campaigns, a display of military prowess and strategic planning, all under the guise of sport. Thousands of servants would be mobilized, vast tracts of land cleared or fenced, exotic animals brought in from distant lands. You see the gleaming weapons, the specially bred horses, the trained falcons perched majestically on their handlers' arms. The emperor, often riding at the head of a formidable retinue, would participate not just as a hunter, but as a general, commanding his forces in a mock battle against nature. The hunt itself was a ritualized slaughter, designed to showcase the emperor's courage, skill, and dominance over the natural world. Every kill was observed, every trophy displayed, becoming a testament to his power. And even the subsequent feast, held in luxurious tents erected for the occasion, was a part of the spectacle, a celebratory display of the day's conquest, complete with roasted game, fine wines, and further entertainments. You are not just witnessing a hunt, you are witnessing a carefully orchestrated reaffirmation of imperial might. Even as an observer, you too are part of this elaborate production. Your role is to appreciate, to marvel, to reflect the emperor's enjoyment back at him. Your reactions are not entirely your own, they are carefully calibrated responses, a subtle mirroring of imperial sentiment. To appear bored or worse, disapproving would be an act of profound disrespect. You learn to smile at the appropriate moment, to offer a well-timed compliment, to show enthusiasm for the emperor's chosen entertainment, even if your own personal tastes lie elsewhere. Your participation, however passive, is a continuation of the court's strict adherence to ritual and hierarchy. The very act of witnessing imperial entertainment is an exercise in power. It showcases the emperor's capacity to command beauty, skill, and luxury on an unimaginable scale. It serves as a constant reminder of his absolute authority, his ability to bend the will of thousands to his pleasure. The most exotic spices, the most gifted artists, the most lavish settings, all exist for his singular delight. This display reinforces his divine mandate, presenting him not just as a ruler, but as a being worthy of such elaborate adoration and service. You come to understand that imperial pleasure is never truly private. It is always a public affirmation, a carefully constructed illusion of serene leisure that masks the monumental effort and anxiety that underpins it. The casual elegance of a performance, the effortless flow of a banquet, the tranquil beauty of a garden, each is a testament to the unseen labor, the countless hours of planning, and the pervasive fear that drives the intricate machinery of the imperial court. So, as you watch a court jester perform a humorous skit, or a group of poets recite their latest verses, remember that behind the laughter and the applause lies a profound ritual. It is a ritual of tribute, of service, and of survival. It is a world where even the emperor's delight is not simply a matter of personal preference, but a carefully curated manifestation of his omnipotence, an essential component in the enduring theater of power that defines the imperial court. Every note, every step, every morsel of food serves as a reaffirmation of the emperor's unyielding authority, weaving itself into the very fabric of his absolute rule. These pleasures are not just enjoyed, they are enacted, they are performed, they are lived as a profound and constant echo of the emperor's unchallenged dominion. You have witnessed the unspoken language of the court, the ballet of power in every gesture and glance. Now turn your gaze to another facet of this meticulously sculpted existence, the emperor's leisure. For even in moments of intended diversion, the imperial court remains a stage and every pleasure a performance. It is a spectacle curated with an intensity that borders on obsession, designed not merely to entertain but to reaffirm, to display, to control. Imagine you are a fly on the wall, or perhaps a particularly observant courtier, as the day draws to a close. The heavy silk curtains are drawn against the fading light, but the air within the imperial apartments is not one of quiet repose. Instead, a different kind of energy crackles, a subtle anticipation of the evening's delights. These are not casual pleasures spontaneously arranged. Oh no. The emperor's amusement is a state affair, a finely tuned machine operated by an army of dedicated servants, each a master of their craft, each aware that their performance, however subtle, contributes to the grand tapestry of imperial power. You might think of entertainment as a break from duty, a release from the rigid formality. But for the emperor and for those who served him, even pleasure was a duty. It was a ritualized act, imbued with symbolism and expectation. Consider the musicians, for example. You might hear the distant ethereal strains of a zither, or the powerful thrumming of a drum, echoing through the vast halls. These are not ordinary players. They are artists chosen for their flawless technique, their profound understanding of mood and melody. They have undergone years of rigorous training, their fingers calloused, their voices perfected, all to produce the precise auditory landscape the emperor desires. Their lives are dedicated to the pursuit of sonic perfection, to crafting harmonies that soothe an imperial mind, or stirring rhythms that ignite an imperial spirit. Their instruments, too, are often works of art, inlaid with precious stones, carved from rare woods, symbols of the wealth and artistry at the emperor's command. When they play, you observe the precise choreography of their movements, the bowing of their heads, the subtle shifts in their posture, all part of the performance. They are not simply making music, they are offering a sonic tribute, a carefully constructed soundscape designed to transport or calm, to elevate or inspire. Their very presence, their disciplined artistry, speaks volumes about the emperor's discerning taste and limitless resources. Then there are the dancers. You see them glide into the imperial chamber, perhaps veiled in shimmering silks, their movements fluid as water, precise as clockwork. Their performances tell stories, myths of gods and heroes, or allegories of nature and conquest. Every step, every hand gesture, every turn of the head is rehearsed countless times, polished to an exquisite sheen. Their faces, though often serene or dramatically expressive, conceal the years of discipline, the hours spent perfecting a single pose, the aching muscles, the unwavering focus required to achieve such grace. They are not simply moving bodies, they are living sculptures, animated by imperial will, designed to captivate the eye and transport the imagination. The costumes themselves are a spectacle. Elaborate headdresses, layers of embroidered fabric, jewels that catch the light with every sway. These are not costumes designed for comfort, but for effect, for the dramatic impact they have on the imperial gaze. And as you watch, You understand that these dancers are not performing for a general audience. They are performing for one singular individual. Their success or failure rests entirely on the emperor's reaction, a subtle nod, a slight smile, or perhaps an imperceptible frown that could spell their doom. The air is thick with their silent plea for approval, their desperate desire to please. Beyond music and dance, the imperial court often indulged in theatrical performances. Imagine elaborate puppet shows with intricate figures brought to life by unseen hands, telling tales of morality or conquest. Or perhaps a troupe of acrobats, their bodies bending and twisting in gravity-defying feats, eliciting gasps of awe. Storytellers, their voices rich and modulated, would weave narratives of ancient heroes or distant lands, captivating the emperor with their eloquence. These performances were more than mere entertainment. They were often didactic, reinforcing cultural values, historical narratives, or even subtly conveying political messages, all wrapped in the guise of amusement. You might find yourself observing the preparations for a grand hunt. This is not a simple excursion into the wilderness. Oh no. Imperial hunts were vast, meticulously organized campaigns, a display of military prowess and strategic planning, all under the guise of sport. Thousands of servants would be mobilized, vast tracts of land cleared or fenced, exotic animals brought in from distant lands. You see the gleaming weapons, the specially bred horses, the trained falcons perched majestically on their handlers' arms. The emperor, often riding at the head of a formidable retinue, would participate not just as a hunter, but as a general, commanding his forces in a mock battle against nature. The hunt itself was a ritualized slaughter, designed to showcase the emperor's courage, skill, and dominance over the natural world. Every kill was observed, every trophy displayed, becoming a testament to his power. And even the subsequent feast, held in luxurious tents erected for the occasion, was a part of the spectacle, a celebratory display of the day's conquest, complete with roasted game, fine wines, and further entertainments. You are not just witnessing a hunt, you are witnessing a carefully orchestrated reaffirmation of imperial might. Then there were the more intimate forms of entertainment. Perhaps a game of chess or a complex board game, played in a quiet chamber. Even these moments of seemingly simple recreation were fraught with unspoken rules. The emperor would play not merely for amusement, but to exercise his intellect, to demonstrate his strategic thinking. His opponents, often favored courtiers, walked a perilous tightrope. They must play well enough to challenge, to make the game engaging, but never so well as to humiliate the emperor, never to make him feel less than supreme. A well-placed compliment on his brilliant move, a subtle error that allows him to triumph, these were the delicate arts of playing games with a sovereign. The stakes were not merely the game itself, but the favor, or indeed, the displeasure, of the realm's most powerful individual. Consider the feasts and banquets. These were perhaps the most lavish and multi-sensory forms of imperial entertainment. You smell the rich aromas wafting from the imperial kitchens, an army of chefs working tirelessly to produce dishes of astonishing variety and complexity. Each course is a work of art, presented with ceremonial precision. Food itself becomes a medium for display, exotic ingredients procured at immense cost, culinary techniques honed over generations. But it is not just the food. The entire dining experience is a performance. You see the procession of servers, moving with synchronized grace, their footsteps silent on the opulent carpets. Each dish is announced, its ingredients sometimes described, its origin celebrated. The vessels are crafted from gold, silver, jade, or exquisite porcelain, reflecting the emperor's boundless wealth. Musicians play softly in the background, dancers perform between courses, and poets recite verses celebrating the emperor's glory or the bounty of his empire. The seating arrangements, the order of toasts, the precise etiquette of consumption, all are carefully orchestrated. Your place at the table, your proximity to the emperor, the type of food you are permitted to eat, All of these communicate your status within the rigid hierarchy of the court. Even the conversation is guided, with topics deemed appropriate for imperial ears, and laughter, when it occurs, must be measured and respectful. You are not simply eating. You are participating in a grand culinary ritual, a celebration of imperial power and generosity. And what about the gardens? Imperial gardens were not just spaces of natural beauty, they were meticulously curated landscapes, designed as living theaters for imperial pleasure. You walk along winding paths, past meticulously pruned trees, artificial mountains, and serene ponds stocked with colorful fish. Exotic birds, housed in ornate aviaries, sing their melodic tunes. Every rock, every stream, every flower is placed with deliberate intent, often reflecting philosophical principles or symbolic meanings important to the emperor. These gardens provided settings for poetry readings, quiet contemplation, or even intimate gatherings. Sometimes rare and exotic animals brought from distant lands would roam in specially designated enclosures, a living testament to the empire's reach and the emperor's ability to command wonders. The construction and maintenance of these gardens required unimaginable resources and an army of gardeners, landscapers, and artisans, all dedicated to creating an idealized natural world, perfectly controlled and ordered, a microcosm of the emperor's domain. For the emperor, these spaces were sanctuaries, but even here the unspoken rules of the court lingered. The beauty was created for his enjoyment, and any imperfection, any deviation from the pristine order, could bring swift and severe consequences for those responsible. The tranquility of the garden was a fragile construct, maintained by vigilance and fear. The constant pressure on those tasked with curating imperial entertainment was immense. Imagine you are a chief eunuch, or a master of ceremonies, responsible for ensuring the emperor's satisfaction. Your career, your very life, depends on your ability to anticipate his moods, to discern his desires, to flawlessly execute every detail. You must possess an encyclopedic knowledge of all available talent, an exquisite sense of timing, and an unwavering commitment to perfection. The search for novelty was perpetual. An emperor's boredom was a dangerous thing, often leading to capricious decisions, to the sudden disfavor of once favored courtiers, or even to the downfall of entire factions. You must constantly seek out new performers, invent new forms of amusement, surprise the imperial palate with unprecedented dishes, or unveil unheard-of spectacles. This required a vast network of scouts, emissaries dispatched to the farthest corners of the empire, searching for unique talents, rare animals, or innovative ideas that might briefly capture the imperial imagination. The stress of this pursuit is palpable. You see the subtle lines of worry etched around the eyes of the palace manager responsible for the emperor's dinner, the frantic whispered consultations between the musicians before a performance, the almost imperceptible tremor in the hand of a dancer as she awaits her cue. They are not merely performing, they are perpetually on trial, their worth and survival hanging in the balance with every note, every step, every word. The rewards for success, however, could be equally immense. A single laugh from the emperor, a gesture of appreciation, could elevate a family, bestow riches, or grant immense influence. A favored entertainer might receive lavish gifts, exemption from certain duties, or even a privileged position within the court hierarchy. Their art, honed through years of sacrifice, was their currency, their only path to distinction and security in a world where everything revolved around the supreme ruler. Even as an observer, you too are part of this elaborate production. Your role is to appreciate, to marvel, to reflect the emperor's enjoyment back at him. Your reactions are not entirely your own, they are carefully calibrated responses, a subtle mirroring of imperial sentiment. To appear bored or worse, disapproving would be an act of profound disrespect. You learn to smile at the appropriate moment, to offer a well-timed compliment, to show enthusiasm for the emperor's chosen entertainment, even if your own personal tastes lie elsewhere. Your participation, however passive, is a continuation of the court's strict adherence to ritual and hierarchy. The very act of witnessing imperial entertainment is an exercise in power. It showcases the emperor's capacity to command beauty, skill, and luxury on an unimaginable scale. It serves as a constant reminder of his absolute authority, his ability to bend the will of thousands to his pleasure. The most exotic spices, the most gifted artists, the most lavish settings, all exist for his singular delight. This display reinforces his divine mandate, presenting him not just as a ruler, but as a being worthy of such elaborate adoration and service. You come to understand that imperial pleasure is never truly private. It is always a public affirmation, a carefully constructed illusion of serene leisure that masks the monumental effort and anxiety that underpins it. The casual elegance of a performance, the effortless flow of a banquet, the tranquil beauty of a garden, each is a testament to the unseen labor, the countless hours of planning, and the pervasive fear that drives the intricate machinery of the imperial court. So, as you watch a court jester perform a humorous skit, or a group of poets recite their latest verses, remember that behind the laughter and the applause lies a profound ritual. It is a ritual of tribute, of service, and of survival. It is a world where even the emperor's delight is not simply a matter of personal preference, but a carefully curated manifestation of his omnipotence, an essential component in the enduring theater of power that defines the imperial court. Every note, every step, every morsel of food serves as a reaffirmation of the emperor's unyielding authority, weaving itself into the very fabric of his absolute rule. These pleasures are not just enjoyed, they are enacted, they are performed, they are lived as a profound and constant echo of the emperor's unchallenged dominion. You have witnessed the orchestrated pleasures, the careful choreographies of joy and tribute, all profound echoes of the emperor's unchallenged dominion. But beneath the audible sounds of music, laughter, and recited poetry, an even more intricate dance unfolds. It is a silent conversation, a language without words, where the slightest tilt of a head or the precise placement of a fan can carry the weight of a royal decree, or seal a courtier's fate. In these imperial realms, communication is not always a matter of speech. Often, it is a nuanced ballet of gestures, a lexicon of body language so utterly critical, that misunderstanding it could mean not just social embarrassment, but swift, irrecoverable ruin. Imagine yourself in a grand antechamber at the Forbidden City, or perhaps within the opulent salons of Versailles. You are one among many, a tapestry of silks and brocades, each person vying for attention, for favor, for a subtle sign from the sovereign. The emperor or king sits upon his throne, or reclines in his chair of state, his face often a placid mask. He rarely needs to speak aloud to convey his wishes. His will is instead articulated through 1,000 unspoken cues, broadcast silently to those meticulously trained to receive them. This system of nonverbal mandates was not merely a supplement to spoken command. It was often the primary, most powerful, and most dangerous form of communication, a pervasive undercurrent shaping every interaction. Consider the fan. Not merely an accessory to ward off the heat or add a flourish to an outfit, the fan in many courts was a sophisticated instrument of secret communication, a compact and deadly weapon in the hands of a master. In the courts of Europe, a lady might hold her fan open and still, slowly fanning herself with a gentle rhythm, to indicate a calm demeanor, perhaps even an invitation to conversation. But what if she snapped it shut with a decisive flick of the wrist? That could signal disdain, a sharp rejection, or a command for silence. A fan held over the ear could mean, "I wish to speak with you," while tapping it on the left hand might convey, "I am discontented." Each movement, each angle, each degree of openness, was a coded message, understood by those initiated into this clandestine ballet. The fan became an extension of the will, a silent telegraph relaying desires and displeasure without a single syllable spoken. In Japan, particularly within the Edo period shogunate, the fan or sensu held even deeper layers of significance. Samurai carried fans not just for cooling, but as props in their martial arts, as pointers for giving directions, and as instruments for silent judgment. A general might tap his fan against his palm, indicating a decision made, or point it sharply towards a subordinate to convey a command without utterance. For women of the court, the fan was an art form in itself, its delicate movements conveying layers of emotion and intention. A demure flutter might hide a smile or a frown, allowing for an expression of feeling that could be quickly masked should the situation demand it. The fan was a veil, a tool of flirtation, a weapon of discretion. To drop one's fan could be a deliberate signal, a challenge, or a plea. To pick up a dropped fan for someone could be an act of profound deference, or a subtle offer of alliance. Beyond the fan, the human body itself was an exquisitely tuned instrument of communication. Gestures, even the most minute, held monumental meaning. In the Chinese imperial court, for example, the kowtow, a deep bow where one kneels and touches the forehead to the ground, was the ultimate expression of submission and reverence. But even within the kowtow there were gradations. A single kowtow was respectful, 3 kowtows and 9 prostrations, a ritual known as Sangue Gyoko, was reserved for the emperor himself, a profound declaration of absolute fealty. To perform it imperfectly, to hesitate, or to offer a lesser bow when a greater one was expected, was to question the emperor's divine right, an act of treason carrying dire consequences. Consider the simple act of pointing. In many cultures, pointing directly at someone can be seen as rude or aggressive. In a royal court, such a gesture from a high-ranking official could be an accusation, a command, or a dismissal. From a lower-ranking courtier towards the emperor, it would be unthinkable, a transgression punishable by death. Instead, subtle hand movements, a slight shift of the gaze or the placement of an arm, would serve to indicate direction or focus. A hand extended palm down could be an invitation to approach, or a command to halt. A hand raised, palm facing outwards, might signify a blessing or a powerful dismissal. Your posture itself spoke volumes. To stand ramrod straight, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, conveyed confidence and respect. To slouch or to appear too relaxed in the presence of royalty was an affront. To kneel was a sign of supplication, of acknowledging superior authority. The position of your hands was equally vital. Hands clasped respectfully before you, or hidden within the long sleeves of your robes, indicated decorum. Hands casually placed on hips or gestured wildly could suggest insolence or a lack of self-control, 2 grave offenses in a world that valued meticulous order. Your gaze was a silent declaration. Direct eye contact with an emperor or king was often forbidden, or at least highly regulated. To meet the royal gaze too boldly could be seen as challenging his authority. To avert your eyes too quickly or too often might suggest guilt or insincerity. The ideal was a deferential gaze, observing but not confronting, acknowledging but not scrutinizing. Courtiers learned to read the emperor's eyes, even when his face was otherwise impassive. A flicker of boredom, a spark of interest, a shadow of displeasure, these were vital clues to his mood and intentions, clues that could determine the course of a day, or the fate of an entire faction. Beyond human gestures, even the arrangement and interaction with objects conveyed powerful nonverbal mandates. Imagine a tray of tea brought before the empress. The placement of the cups, the order in which they were presented, the specific type of tea chosen, could all carry symbolic weight. If a particular dignitary was offered a cup before another, it indicated a shift in favor or standing. If a cup was subtly placed out of reach, it could be a delicate snub, a silent message of disapproval. In the European courts, the presentation of petitions or gifts was fraught with similar nonverbal nuances. How a document was held, how it was presented on bended knee, the speed with which it was accepted or dismissed, all communicated the sovereign's disposition. A king might tap his signet ring impatiently, a silent signal that a tiresome audience was drawing to a close. A queen might toy with a piece of jewelry, a subtle indication of her shifting thoughts or her desire to change the subject. These were not random actions, but carefully observed and interpreted signals within the court's elaborate communication system. Even clothing and accessories beyond the fan were integral to this nonverbal discourse. The way a sleeve was brushed, the drape of a heavy robe, the specific type of hat or crown worn, all these elements conveyed information. In the Ottoman court, the turban could communicate status, profession, and even personal mood. Its style, height, and the jewels adorning it formed a complex visual code. A slightly askew turban might subtly indicate a man in disarray or mourning, while a perfectly coiffed one spoke of order and control. The very fabric of your garments, their colors and their embellishments, were components of your silent self-presentation, speaking volumes about your wealth, your rank, and your adherence to courtly standards. To wear a color deemed inappropriate, or to present oneself in a state of disrepair, would be a blatant nonverbal transgression. Training in this silent language began early. Young pages, ladies-in-waiting, and aspiring officials underwent rigorous instruction. They learned not just etiquette, but the intricate lexicon of nonverbal cues. Tutors drilled them on appropriate bows, the precise angle of a head tilt, the correct way to hold a fan or present an object. They were taught to observe, to listen with their eyes, to discern the emperor's mood from the subtlest contraction of a muscle in his cheek, or the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. It was a constant education, a continuous process of refinement, for the rules were not always explicitly stated, but often implied, learned through observation and painful experience. Children born into these courtly environments absorbed the intricate rules of social hierarchy through 1,000 nonverbal cues before they could even fully articulate them in spoken words, ingraining the silent grammar of power deeply into their very being. Imagine the pressure this placed upon courtiers. Every breath, movement, and stillness was scrutinized. You were not just performing a role, you were living a continuous performance where any error could lead to disgrace. The cost of misinterpretation was staggeringly high. If you failed to understand a silent command, you might carry out the wrong action, infuriating the emperor. If you misread a sign of displeasure as indifference, you might persist in an offense. Such mistakes were rarely forgiven. The psychological toll of living under such constant, nonverbal scrutiny cannot be overstated. Imagine never truly being able to relax, always aware that every flicker of emotion across your face, every unconscious gesture could be observed, interpreted, and potentially used against you. Courtiers lived in a state of perpetual performance, their true feelings often suppressed beneath a carefully constructed facade. This forced emotional restraint often manifested in subtle nonverbal ways, a tremor in the hand when serving wine, a slight stiffness in the neck, an almost imperceptible widening of the eyes when presented with unexpected news. These were the tells, the cracks in the carefully crafted masks, that only the most astute observers could read. The game of courtly survival was as much about concealing your own nonverbal messages as it was about deciphering those of others. A misstep in nonverbal communication could mean exile, imprisonment, or execution. History is replete with tales of courtiers who fell from grace not for spoken treason, but for perceived slights conveyed through body language, an ill-timed glance, or a poorly executed gesture. The very ambiguity of this silent language was part of its power. It allowed the emperor to exert control without committing to explicit words, providing plausible deniability, yet leaving no doubt in the minds of those who understood. The emperor's chief eunuch in the Chinese court, or the Lord Chamberlain at Versailles, were masters of this silent language. They were the primary interpreters, the bridges between the sovereign's unspoken will and the court's actions. Their ability to correctly decipher the emperor's mood and desires was paramount to their survival and influence. They would often subtly relay these unspoken mandates to other courtiers, translating a glance into a specific instruction, or a gesture into a detailed command. These intermediaries bore an immense burden, for they were responsible for ensuring the emperor's unspoken wishes were perfectly understood and executed. Any failure to translate accurately could be blamed on them, making their position one of immense power, but also immense peril. This silent language permeated the entire court structure, reinforcing hierarchies and maintaining social order. The way a lower-ranking noble bowed to a higher-ranking one, the deferential distance maintained, the tone of a whispered conversation, all contributed to a complex system of status and power. The physical space itself became part of this nonverbal communication. Who was allowed to stand close to the emperor? Who had to remain at a respectful distance? Who could turn their back and who dared not? These were unspoken rules, deeply ingrained and fiercely enforced. For example, in the court of Louis XIV at Versailles, the Lever du Roi or the King's Awakening was a highly ritualized event where proximity to the king was a marker of status. You understood your place not through a decree on parchment, but through the physical space you were allowed to occupy. The subtle art of conveying disapproval without words was also highly developed. An emperor might simply ignore a courtier's presence, a devastating snub more potent than any shouted rebuke. He might turn his back or direct his gaze elsewhere, making it clear that the individual had ceased to exist within his immediate sphere of attention. This form of social ostracization, a silent dismissal, was a powerful weapon that could crush ambition and reputation without a single word being uttered. This nonverbal world extended even to the arts and performances within the court. A dancer's movements, a musician's posture, the way a poem was recited, all carried subtle messages. A particularly graceful bow from a performer might convey a double layer of respect, for the art form and for the sovereign. A less enthusiastic performance, even if technically flawless, could be perceived as a lack of devotion or respect, a silent transgression. There was also the critical aspect of not communicating non-verbally when an explicit verbal instruction was given. Imagine an emperor delivering a direct command. To interject with a gesture of disagreement, a roll of the eyes, or even a subtle shake of the head would be an act of overt defiance, challenging his authority in a way that words might not even dare. Silence, stillness, and an unwavering gaze of acceptance were often the only acceptable nonverbal responses to a direct imperial mandate. The absence of a nonverbal message when expected was also a powerful message in itself. To remain impassive when emotion was called for, or to show no reaction when surprise was anticipated, could convey a calculating nature, a disinterest, or even a hidden agenda. This system was not a static language, but one that could shift subtly depending on the emperor's mood, the political climate, or the specific individuals involved. This constant fluidity demanded an unparalleled level of mental agility and emotional intelligence. The silence itself became a character in this drama. The hushed atmosphere of many imperial courts, where voices were kept low and movements restrained, amplified the significance of every nonverbal cue. In such an environment, the rustle of silk, the soft tap of a fan, the slow, deliberate turn of a head, reverberated with immense meaning. The lack of overt noise forced attention onto these subtle actions, ensuring that no gesture, however small, went unnoticed by the vigilant eyes of those whose lives depended on their interpretation. This quiet served to elevate the unspoken, imbuing it with a sacred, almost ritualistic weight. This pervasive, silent language was, in essence, a continuous reaffirmation of the emperor's absolute dominion. It was a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute performance of subservience and authority, enacted without the need for grand pronouncements. The subtle choreography of bows, glances, and object placements was a constant reminder to every courtier and servant of their position within the meticulously ordered cosmos of the imperial court. It taught them their place, their boundaries, and the consequences of overstepping them, all without the need for a single spoken word of command. It forces you to consider the immense power embedded in something as intangible as a glance, or as ephemeral as a hand gesture. In these courts, such subtleties could literally be matters of life and death, of favor or disgrace. The emperor's unspoken will was a constant, invisible force, shaping destinies, propelling careers and extinguishing lives. It was a language of the soul, expressed through the body, understood by the mind and enforced by the absolute power of the throne. To truly comprehend the strange rituals of emperors and their servants, you must first learn to see, to interpret, and to submit to this profound and pervasive silent dialogue, where every movement, every stillness, every unspoken nuance, was a mandate. You have felt the silent mandate, understood the power in an unspoken glance. Now you step deeper into the labyrinthine corridors where every breath you take, every stitch on your garment, every precise placement of your foot, is not merely observed, but rigidly governed by a staggering architecture of rules. These are not grand declarations chiseled in stone, but the bureaucracy of breadcrumbs, the seemingly tiny details that collectively form a monumental, inescapable web of control. You might think of it as a historical equivalent of the most complex, multi-layered computer program, dictating every variable of human interaction within the imperial sphere. Imagine waking within this system. Your day does not begin with personal whim but with prescribed duty. You are not a free agent. You are a cog, polished and precise, within a grand, intricate mechanism. You learn very quickly that the court thrives on order, and order is maintained through an almost insane obsession with minutiae. These are the rules that transform the ordinary into the ceremonial, the mundane into the sacred, and the individual into a living symbol of their rank and loyalty. The true genius, and the terror, of these courts was their ability to elevate every single aspect of existence into a moment of ritualized significance. Consider, for example, your clothing. It is not simply what you wear, but a coded language legible to everyone around you. You cannot simply choose a color because it pleases your eye. The hue of your silks, the specific embroidery that adorns your cuffs, the very texture of the fabric, the number of pleats in your skirt or the cut of your tunic, all of these elements speak volumes. They announce your precise rank, your department, perhaps even your current favor or disfavor with the emperor. You are a walking document, a moving scroll of your status. To wear the wrong shade of crimson or a pattern reserved for a higher official is not a fashion faux pas. It is an act of treason against the established order. It challenges the visual hierarchy that underpins the entire court. You are dressing for an audience with the emperor. You meticulously select the correct robes. Each layer is applied not just for warmth or aesthetics, but with a knowledge of its symbolic weight. The inner garments, often of simpler cloth, denote your private self, almost entirely hidden. The outer robes, rich with color and design, are your public declaration. Perhaps a specific bird motif is permitted only for those of the fourth rank, while an auspicious cloud pattern is for the second. You check and recheck your attire, your reflection showing not your personality, but your carefully constructed official identity. The smallest detail, a forgotten sash or a misplaced ornament, could draw the attention of a critical eye, leading to a quiet correction or a more public rebuke. This constant vigilance transforms the act of getting dressed from a personal routine into a high-stakes performance. Once dressed, you must navigate the physical space of the palace. Here too, the rules are absolute, though often unwritten, conveyed through centuries of tradition and enforced by the silent glares of those more experienced. You do not stride through these hallowed halls. You move with a measured gait, your pace dictated by your rank and the specific corridor you traverse. Certain paths are reserved for higher officials. Others are for servants. You learn the invisible lines drawn on the floor, the thresholds that denote shifting levels of prestige. To cross into a forbidden zone, even by accident, is a grave error. When you encounter another courtier, the protocol for greeting is a ballet of precise movements. The depth of your bow, the angle of your head, the placement of your hands, all are calibrated to reflect the exact difference in your respective ranks. If you are of lower rank, your bow will be deeper, your eyes cast downwards, your deference absolute. If you are of higher rank, your nod will be slight, perhaps a mere acknowledgement of existence. To offer too shallow a bow to a superior is insolence. To offer too deep a bow to an inferior is to mock them, or worse, to imply a false equality that destabilizes the hierarchy. You become acutely aware of your body, not as an expression of self, but as an instrument of adherence to a complex social grammar. You are called to attend an imperial ceremony. You enter the grand hall, not through any door you choose, but through the one designated for your specific rank. You proceed to your allotted position, a spot precisely measured out on the vast floor. You do not shift your weight, you do not fidget, you do not even glance around casually. Your eyes are fixed, your posture rigid, your entire being projecting unwavering respect and unwavering obedience. Hours may pass in this frozen tableau, your muscles aching, your mind drifting, but your body remains a perfect sentinel of courtly decorum. You are an immobile part of a living mosaic, each piece meticulously placed, each piece contributing to the overall impression of immutable order and absolute power radiating from the throne. Now consider the realm of speech. The words you choose are perhaps even more perilous than your movements or your attire. You must master a vocabulary of deference and a grammar of hierarchy. To speak directly to the emperor without being addressed is unthinkable. To interrupt a superior, even with the most urgent news, is a monumental transgression. You learn the specific honorifics for every rank, the precise terms of address for every relative of the imperial family, for every minister, for every fellow courtier. There are words that are simply not spoken in court. Topics that are taboo, phrases that might imply criticism or discontent. You become a master of circumlocution, of veiled suggestion, of implying rather than stating. If you must convey an unpleasant truth, you learn to wrap it in layers of politeness, allegory, and strategic ambiguity, ensuring that the message is received but the messenger remains safe or at least less exposed. The language of the court is less about direct communication and more about subtle negotiation, a constant dance around the potential pitfalls of speaking too plainly. For example, when preparing a petition or an official report, the wording is subject to intense scrutiny. Every character, every phrase, every respectful salutation is weighed for its exact meaning, its precise level of deference, its adherence to established literary precedents. A misplaced particle, a slightly informal turn of phrase, could invalidate your entire submission, or worse, be interpreted as a sign of disrespect or even sedition. You employ scribes who specialize in these intricate forms, who know the centuries-old templates and the minute variations required for each specific recipient and purpose. You do not just write, you compose a carefully constructed edifice of words designed to impress, persuade, and above all to conform. The bureaucracy of breadcrumbs extends even to the most intimate aspects of the imperial household, far beyond the public gaze, yet setting precedents that ripple throughout the court. Take the emperor's meals. These are not simply acts of nourishment, they are elaborate rituals. You might imagine that the emperor eats when he is hungry, or chooses what he desires. Not so. The menu is planned days in advance, often subject to multiple approvals, not only for culinary delight but for symbolic meaning, for health, and for security. Each dish is prepared by specialized cooks, tasted by numerous officials to guard against poison, and then presented with a precise ceremony. When the emperor dines, you witness a silent procession. Servants move with synchronized precision, placing each dish in its designated spot on the imperial table. The order of presentation, the specific utensils used for each course, even the way a piece of fruit is peeled and presented, every action is choreographed. You do not see the emperor casually reaching for a morsel. His hands move with a practiced grace, sometimes assisted by attendants who present the food directly to him, ensuring he does not exert himself unnecessarily, emphasizing his divine, separate nature. Every detail reinforces his exalted status, transforming a simple meal into a performance of supreme power and privilege. You, as an attendant or observer, are part of this living tableau, your very presence contributing to the aura of ceremony. Access to the emperor himself is the most heavily guarded and ritualized aspect of court life. His waking, his dressing, his brief moments of leisure, his going to bed, each is a precisely timed and orchestrated event, attended by only a select few, whose presence is itself a mark of immense favor. To be permitted within the emperor's private chambers as he prepared for his day was a supreme honor, granted only to the highest echelons of the court. You stand silently, observing, assisting where commanded, acutely aware that your every movement is being scrutinized, your very breathing perhaps too loud. The individuals permitted this access were not chosen merely for their skill, but for their absolute trustworthiness, their flawless adherence to protocol, and their understanding of the unspoken rules of proximity. Imagine the tension of being in the emperor's presence, knowing that a single misstep, a clumsy movement, an accidental glance, a moment of distraction, could end your career or worse. The bureaucracy of breadcrumbs here means that even the placement of the emperor's slippers, the temperature of his tea, the speed at which his hair was combed, all fell under a strict regimen transforming personal care into public duty. Beyond the direct presence of the emperor, the entire administrative machinery of the court was an overwhelming testament to this obsession with detail. Thousands of scribes, clerks, and record keepers were employed to document everything. Every decree, every appointment, every dismissal, every gift given or received, every ceremonial expense, every official communication. All were meticulously recorded, cross-referenced, and filed. You could request a document detailing the precise type of silk used for a specific official's robes 3 decades prior, and it would likely be found. This relentless record-keeping ensured accountability, established precedent, and made it nearly impossible for anyone to deviate from the established order without leaving a paper trail. This vast administrative body was not merely about maintaining historical archives. It was an active force of control. Court officials were constantly monitored. Their attendance at ceremonies, the punctuality of their reports, the correctness of their attire, the decorum of their interactions, all could be noted by an observant clerk, added to a dossier, and later used to determine promotions, demotions, or even charges of misconduct. You learn to live with the knowledge that your actions, however minor, are not truly private. Someone somewhere is likely noting them down. This omnipresent, though often unseen, surveillance fosters an environment where meticulous adherence to rules becomes a survival mechanism. The weight of this bureaucracy of breadcrumbs, of these tiny details and monumental rules, bore down heavily on every individual. For the emperor, it meant a life of relentless public performance, every moment structured, every action imbued with symbolic weight. For the courtier, it was a constant, draining exercise in self-control and vigilance. You internalize the rules not just as external strictures, but as part of your very being. You learn to anticipate the needs of superiors, to interpret the slightest shift in mood, to navigate the treacherous currents of court politics through perfect adherence to protocol. A life lived under such intense scrutiny, where a single misstep in etiquette could lead to public humiliation or even banishment, shaped personalities profoundly. It fostered a culture of extreme caution, of elaborate politeness, and of profound deference. Innovation, spontaneity, and directness were often suppressed in favor of established forms and procedures. The system was designed to reduce individual agency, to ensure that personal will never threaten the collective, ritualized will of the imperial order. You come to understand that these rules, however tedious or seemingly insignificant, were the very sinews of power. They were the visible manifestation of the emperor's absolute authority, an authority so pervasive it reached into the smallest corners of daily life. By controlling the minute, they controlled the monumental. By dictating the details, they dictated the destiny. This was not a system designed for comfort or personal expression. It was a system engineered for stability, for hierarchy, and for the perpetuation of the imperial myth. Every bow, every word, every precise stitch on every garment, was a tiny thread in an immense tapestry, woven over centuries, unbreakable in its complexity, holding the entire court in its immutable grasp. You exist within this tapestry, defined by its patterns, guided by its threads, and utterly bound by its rules. You exist within this tapestry, defined by its patterns, guided by its threads, and utterly bound by its rules. And nowhere are these threads more intricately woven, more rigidly enforced, than in the most private of moments. You might imagine that even an emperor, for all the grandeur and spectacle, might find a quiet refuge in the solitude of their own bedchamber, a sanctuary from the ceaseless performance of their public life. Yet, for an emperor, true privacy was often a luxury as unattainable as true anonymity. Even the rituals of sleep and waking, those intimate transitions between consciousness and unconsciousness, were transformed into meticulously choreographed ballets, public spectacles of private moments, designed to reaffirm power, hierarchy, and the emperor's sacred, solitary position at the apex of the world. Imagine yourself now as the long day of audiences and decrees begins to draw to its close. The sun, a weary ember, dips below the palace rooftops, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading gold. A hushed anticipation settles over the vast imperial residence. You are escorted through a series of increasingly grand chambers, the air growing heavier with the scent of burning lamp oil and perhaps a faint, sweet incense. The clatter of the day's business has quieted, replaced by the soft rustle of silk and the muted footsteps of attendants. Your evening, that is the emperor's evening, is not your own. It is a carefully orchestrated descent into the realm of rest, a ceremony known in some European courts as the coucher. You are led into your spacious antechamber, where the first of many layers of official garments are meticulously removed. Each tunic, each embroidered robe, each jeweled collar is handled with reverent care, folded precisely by the designated chamberlain or page. There is a specific order to this disrobing, a prescribed sequence for each article of clothing to be taken off, often passed to a particular servant whose sole duty it is to manage that item. You feel the weight of the day's attire lift from your shoulders, not in a moment of personal relief, but as a public declaration that the emperor is transitioning from the active ruler to the sleeping monarch. Next, perhaps a bath. In some traditions, this was a ceremonial cleansing, not merely for hygiene but for purification. Imagine the warm, fragrant water, infused with herbs or flower petals, prepared in a basin of polished copper or porcelain. Servants attend to every detail, from testing the water's temperature to pouring it over your skin with delicate ladles. They scrub your back, wash your hair, carefully towel you dry with soft linen. Even in this most vulnerable state, you are not truly alone. Your eyes remain open, observing the silent dedication of those around you, a constant reminder of the hundreds, perhaps thousands, whose lives are devoted to serving your every need, to upholding the sanctity of your person. After the bath, or sometimes in lieu of it, comes the anointing and perfuming. Your skin might be massaged with precious oils, your hair brushed and styled for the night, perhaps braided or simply tied back, depending on the custom. These substances are chosen not just for their scent, but often for their perceived medicinal properties or symbolic significance. Each touch is light, respectful, professional. You are not a human being receiving personal care. You are a living emblem, being prepared for the sacred vulnerability of sleep. Finally, you enter the imperial bedchamber itself. This room is a marvel of opulence and security. Think of a vast space, perhaps lit by dozens of beeswax candles or oil lamps, casting dancing shadows on tapestries depicting ancient victories or serene landscapes. The air is still, perhaps cooled by strategically placed screens or warmed by concealed braziers. At the very center, dominating the room, stands your imperial bed. It is not simply furniture, it is a throne for the night. Describe its grandeur. Perhaps it is a colossal four-poster, carved from dark, gleaming wood, adorned with gold leaf or mother-of-pearl inlay. Heavy velvet curtains, often embroidered with the imperial emblem, hang from its canopy, designed to be drawn shut, creating a private sanctum within the public chamber. The mattress, filled with the finest goose down or silk floss, is impossibly soft, layered with sheets of the purest linen or silk, crisp and cool against your skin. You observe the chamberlains meticulously smoothing every wrinkle, ensuring the covers are perfectly aligned. This is not just comfort. It is order, an outward manifestation of the supreme order you represent. Before you even approach the bed, another series of precise actions unfold. Attendants might bring you a final drink, perhaps warm milk or a calming herbal tea, always first tasted by a food taster to assure your safety. A physician might check your pulse, inquire about your health. Courtiers, specially privileged, might be admitted for a final, brief audience, presenting petitions or reports, their voices hushed, their bows deep. You offer a few words, a nod, a gesture of dismissal, each imbued with immense power. Then comes the moment of undressing into your nightclothes. Again, specific servants are assigned this task. Your fine silk robe or linen shirt is presented. The process is slow, deliberate. You do not rush. You stand impassively, allowing hands to assist you to smooth the fabric to ensure it hangs perfectly. You are stripped of the day's burden, but never of your imperial identity. Even in your night attire, you retain an aura of majesty. Finally, you are led to the edge of the bed. You might offer a blessing, a prayer, or simply a silent acknowledgement of the transition. With assistance, you climb into the enormous bed, sinking into its luxurious depths. The heavy curtains are then drawn around the bed with a soft swish, enveloping you in a cocoon of fabric. This is the moment of your perceived privacy, though even now you are not truly alone. Outside the drawn curtains, in the vast bedchamber and the adjacent antechambers, a silent vigil begins. Guards, chosen for their unwavering loyalty and vigilance, stand sentry at every door. Eunuchs, personal chamberlains, or trusted concubines might sleep on pallets or small cots within the chamber itself, their breathing shallow, their ears attuned to every sound. The silence is profound, broken only by the crackle of a dying candle, the faint scurry of a mouse in the walls, or the measured footsteps of a patrolling guard far down the corridor. You lie in the darkness, or perhaps with a single lamp burning low, its glow barely piercing the heavy curtains. Every rustle, every creak, every distant chime of the palace clock is amplified in the quiet of the night. Sleep for an emperor is not merely a physical necessity, it is a strategic vulnerability. The empire cannot afford for its head to be compromised, even in slumber. Your breathing is monitored, your movements watched, your rest protected with an intensity that would be suffocating for anyone else. You understand that this absolute security is a double-edged sword. It safeguards your life, but it also strips away any semblance of individual freedom, even in your dreams. Hours pass in this silent, watchful vigil. The palace is an immense, sleeping beast, but its heart, your bedchamber, remains intensely, unceasingly alive with purpose. Servants take shifts, ensuring constant alertness. The very air you breathe is controlled, its temperature maintained, its freshness ensured. You are a precious, fragile cargo, carefully guarded in your nightly journey through unconsciousness. And then, as the first faint glimmer of dawn lightens the eastern sky, the ritual of waking begins, a ceremony as intricate and profound as the one that put you to rest. This is the lever, or the rising, an event that in many courts was even more public than the coucher. The first to enter your bedchamber, always by a precise order of precedence, are not the highest-ranking officials, but often a designated chamberlain or page. They approach the drawn bed curtains with a hushed reverence. You might hear the soft scraping of their shoes on the polished floor, the barely audible creak of the door. The curtains are slowly, deliberately drawn open. The morning light, still muted, filters into the room. You are expected to be awake, or at least to stir immediately. To sleep too deeply, to be difficult to rouse, could be seen as a sign of weakness, or worse, disinterest in the empire's affairs. Your eyes open to the sight of an attendant, perhaps holding a silver tray with a cup of warm water or a light broth. The first words of the day are exchanged in soft tones, often a formal greeting and inquiry about your rest. Then the procession begins. Your closest personal attendants, perhaps eunuchs or high-ranking chamberlains, are admitted. They offer greetings, a brief update on the night's events, the weather, perhaps the arrival of an important messenger. You might be helped to sit up, a pillow placed behind your back. The heavy covers are carefully folded back. Next, the ritual of dressing commences, a masterpiece of choreographed service. Like the disrobing, it is a layering of power, each garment added with precision and symbolic weight. Servants, often several of them, each responsible for a particular type of clothing, approach the bed. One might hold your undergarments, another your tunic, a third your ceremonial sash. You extend your arms, lift your legs, turn slightly as directed by the gentle, guiding hands. Imagine the feel of the cool linen against your skin, followed by the richness of silk, the weight of velvet, the gleam of embroidery. Each button, each tie, each clasp is fastened with practiced ease. Your personal valet ensures every fold is perfect, every seam straight. Your attire is not simply clothing. It is a uniform of supreme authority, meticulously constructed on your person by a dedicated team. While dressing, other aspects of your morning routine unfold simultaneously. Your hair is meticulously combed, styled, perhaps powdered or oiled by a master barber. Your face is shaved, if the custom dictates, with a razor so sharp you barely feel it, handled by a steady, experienced hand. Your teeth are cleaned with powdered herbs or a special paste. Perfumes and pomades are applied. You are transformed from the sleeping man into the awakening emperor, a figure of immaculate presentation. As your dressing nears completion, more important officials are admitted into the chamber. The Grand Chamberlain, the head of the guards, perhaps a minister of state. They approach with deep bows, presenting urgent documents, intelligence reports, or brief summaries of the morning's schedule. You listen, your expression impassive, occasionally offering a terse question or a concise command. Even these initial exchanges are ritualized, a dance of power and submission. Then comes the Imperial breakfast, another carefully managed event. A small table is set nearby, perhaps with an exquisite porcelain service. The food, though simple, is prepared with the utmost care and subject to rigorous testing. A designated food taster, often a high-ranking official or trusted servant, samples each dish before it reaches your lips, a silent, daily reminder of the ever-present threat of assassination. You eat slowly, deliberately, perhaps with a few chosen courtiers in attendance, their presence a mark of extraordinary favor. Even your nourishment is a public act. After breakfast, or sometimes before, you might perform morning prayers or meditations, a private moment of spiritual connection that is nonetheless observed by your attendants. Your devotion is part of your role, a visible link between your earthly rule and divine authority. Finally, fully dressed, groomed, fed, and informed, you emerge from the bedchamber. The doors are thrown open, revealing a throng of waiting courtiers, officials, and petitioners, all arrayed according to their rank, all bowing deeply as you step forth. You are no longer just a man who has woken from sleep. You are the living embodiment of the state, ready to commence the demanding performance of imperial rule. The transition is complete. This minute attention to your sleep and waking was not simply about comfort or hygiene. It was a profound statement of your centrality, of your irreplaceable role in the cosmic order. Every servant, every gesture, every prescribed movement served to reinforce the imperial mystique. The very act of your waking was a symbolic rebirth of the empire itself, an affirmation of its continuity and stability. The emperor's body, even in its moments of vulnerability, was a sacred vessel, and its care was a matter of state. Consider the pervasive nature of this control. From the moment you closed your eyes at night to the moment you emerged to face the day, you were enmeshed in a web of ritual. It meant that even your dreams, your inner life, were framed by the knowledge of constant observation, of unending expectation. There was no true escape from the demands of the throne, not even in the deepest slumber. You were forever on display, forever performing, even in the seeming privacy of your bed. This relentless ritualization of sleep and waking across different imperial courts, from the Sun King Louis XIV at Versailles to the Son of Heaven in the Forbidden City, speaks volumes about the nature of absolute power. It illustrates how the personal was utterly subsumed by the political. The emperor was not merely a ruler, they were a living institution, their body a stage upon which the drama of governance was perpetually enacted. These seemingly mundane, even boring details of daily life reveal the profound psychological and social engineering at play, constructing and maintaining the very fabric of imperial authority. The profound psychological and social engineering that constructed imperial authority was not some abstract force. No, it was deeply, intimately physical, woven into the very fabric of daily interaction, a dense tapestry of watchful eyes and listening ears. You, as the emperor, the very apex of this engineered world, were never truly alone. Not ever. Even in moments of profound silence, there was always a presence. The air itself, within your grand apartments, seemed to hum with observation. Every slight adjustment of your posture, every barely perceptible sigh, every moment you believed was one of repose, was in fact witnessed. Think of it. From the instant you first stirred from your sleep until the final curtain of night descended, your existence was a performance, not just for the grand court, but for the countless individuals whose lives orbited your own. These were the servants, the silent, omnipresent hands and eyes that orchestrated the minutiae of your day. They anticipated your needs before you even registered them. The valets who laid out your clothes with practiced precision, the chambermaids who moved like phantoms through your bedchambers, the eunuchs in the Forbidden City or the pages at Versailles who stood at the ready, the imperial bodyguards whose watchful gazes never strayed. Each was a pair of eyes, an active participant in the constant surveillance that defined imperial life. This was not merely efficient service. This was an intricate, living system of intelligence gathering. Imagine the subtle currents of information flowing through the palace. Who spoke to whom in the antechamber? What seemed discontented about a particular courtier's expression? Every murmur overheard, every glance exchanged, every perceived slight or sign of favor, was potentially noted, recorded, and reported up the chain of command. The palace was an echo chamber of whispers, a living organism of observation, and you, the emperor, were at its very center, both its orchestrator and its most intensely observed subject. This created a profound paradox at the heart of absolute power. You were the most powerful person in your realm, capable of commanding millions, yet you were also the most scrutinized, the least private. You commanded unswerving loyalty, or at least its performance, but you also lived under the constant shadow of potential betrayal. Your isolation, despite being constantly surrounded by people, was immense. Who could you truly trust when everyone was an observer, a potential informant, a possible threat? To manage this inherent tension, emperors across different cultures developed explicit networks of spies and informants that extended far beyond the visible retinue of servants. These were the ears and eyes of the emperor, the secret police, the unseen agents who burrowed into every level of court society. In the Ming dynasty of China, for example, the eunuch's secret police, such as the embroidered uniform guard and the Eastern Depot, wielded immense, terrifying power. They were instruments of absolute control, capable of investigating anyone, even high-ranking officials, often without proper legal process. The fear these systems instilled was palpable, corrosive. It eroded trust, fostered paranoia, and ensured a brutal adherence to imperial will. At the court of Louis XIV in France, while perhaps less overtly brutal in its internal intelligence gathering, a sophisticated network of informers kept the Sun King abreast of every intrigue. Courtiers knew they were being watched, that their letters might be opened, their conversations overheard and reported. This created a culture of performative loyalty, where every gesture, every word, every piece of clothing was carefully curated to project unwavering devotion to the monarch. A misstep, a perceived slight, could lead to a loss of favor, banishment from court, or even ruin. You, as a courtier, learned to wear a mask, a perpetual expression of deference and admiration, for your very survival depended on it. The courtiers themselves were caught in this same web of surveillance. They were under your gaze, yes, but also under the gaze of each other, and even under the gaze of their own servants who might be secretly feeding information to higher powers. The elaborate dance of courtly life became a constant performance, a perilous tightrope walk where any false move could be fatal. The pressure to conform, to always appear loyal, to never show weakness or dissent, was immense. The palace, in essence, became a panopticon, where the mere possibility of being watched was enough to induce self-regulation and obedience in every inhabitant. Even the most intimate, theoretically sacred spaces within the palace were not truly private. The emperor's bath, his dressing room, his bedroom, these were not havens of solitude. The ritualization of imperial life extended into these deeply personal realms, transforming them into extensions of the public stage. The emperor, often revered as a quasi-divine figure, had a body that was itself sacred, and its care became a sacred rite. The act of dressing in the morning, the levee at Versailles, was a highly choreographed spectacle, witnessed by a select few, then a larger circle, each according to their rank and privilege. It was a performance designed to underscore your majesty, your daily renewal, and your readiness to govern. Consider the intricate protocols surrounding your bathing. At various courts, specially designated servants, often eunuchs or high-ranking ladies-in-waiting, attended to your personal hygiene. Their presence, while practical, also served a symbolic purpose. It ensured that your sacred body was properly tended to, cleansed, and prepared for its imperial duties. But this also meant that even in your most vulnerable moments, you were under observation. The distinction between the sacred and the profane blurred. Your body was sacred, yes, but its care was entrusted to human hands, subject to human observation, and thus vulnerable to human gossip, to the endless whisper network that permeated the palace walls. The psychological toll of living under such a constant gaze must have been immense. For you, the emperor, there was no true respite, no moment to drop the imperial mask. Every action, every word, every expression had potential significance, could be interpreted, misconstrued, or used against you. The constant need for vigilance, the inability to ever truly relax, the perpetual performance of power, these were the invisible chains that bound even the most absolute monarch. It fostered a deep sense of isolation, a profound loneliness at the top. While surrounded by thousands, genuine intimacy and unburdened trust were rare, precious commodities. The very architecture of these grand palaces often facilitated this system of surveillance. Think of the long, echoing corridors of the Forbidden City, designed for both impressive processionals and ease of movement for the myriad staff. Consider the countless antechambers at Versailles, each a waiting room, a place of observation, a transitional space where courtiers waited for their moment in the imperial presence, all the while being watched themselves. The multiple doors, the interconnected rooms, the open courtyards, these were not merely aesthetic choices. They were functional elements of a grand design, enabling the flow of people and information, and reinforcing the idea that no space was truly closed off from the imperial eye, or the eyes acting on its behalf. Let's compare the mechanics of this constant gaze across different imperial courts. In the Ottoman Topkapi Palace, for instance, the harem, often depicted as a place of exotic seclusion, was in fact a highly structured and heavily surveilled environment. While women were largely sequestered, they were constantly watched by eunuchs, by older female overseers, and by each other. The Sultan himself, while enjoying the intimacy of his private quarters, was still attended to by his chosen companions and the ever-present eunuchs. Information from the harem could and often did influence political decisions, making it another crucial node in the palace's intelligence network. The layers of observation were complex, creating a powerful hidden world of influence and intrigue. In the Forbidden City, the eunuchs formed a ubiquitous, indispensable, and often terrifying presence. They were not merely servants. They were a distinct social class with unique access to the emperor's private life. They managed his concubines, attended to his personal needs, and were instrumental in the administration of the inner court. Their sheer numbers and their proximity to the emperor meant they were privy to vast amounts of information, making them both invaluable assets and potential threats. Their loyalty was often tied to their own survival and ambition, leading to intricate factions and alliances within the palace, all operating under the emperor's watchful or sometimes oblivious eye. The servants themselves were not just passive instruments of this constant gaze. Their lives, too, were meticulously controlled, their movements restricted, their loyalties perpetually tested. A servant who witnessed something deemed compromising or important could suddenly find themselves elevated or, more often, silenced. They gained immense, albeit often unofficial, power through their proximity to the emperor, through the information they gathered, and through their ability to influence access and communication. But this power came at a steep price. They lived in constant danger, always susceptible to the vagaries of imperial favor, to accusations from rivals, or to the emperor's own paranoia. Their every action was scrutinized, their every whisper potentially a career-ending or life-ending mistake. They were the eyes and ears, yes, but they were also perpetually seen and heard. Within this environment, the whisper network became an incredibly potent force. Rumors, gossip, veiled criticisms, these flowed through the palace corridors like an invisible current, capable of undermining reputations, shifting alliances, and even toppling powerful figures. An emperor might attempt to control this flow of information through his spies and informants, to squash dissent before it gained traction. But the nature of a human court, with its countless personal ambitions and resentments, meant that this was an almost impossible task. The emperor himself was often the subject of these whispers, whether they concerned his health, his temperament, his favor towards certain individuals, or his alleged indiscretions. The constant gaze, therefore, was not unidirectional. It flowed both up and down, creating a complex, often dangerous information ecosystem. The legacy of this constant gaze lives on, not just in historical records, but in the very fabric of how we understand power. These elaborate rituals, the omnipresent servants, the networks of spies, the transformation of even sacred spaces into stages for surveillance, all reveal a fundamental truth about absolute monarchy. It was a system built on visibility and control, on the meticulous construction of a public persona, and on the perpetual management of human observation. Even after death, the imperial gaze, the memory of its omnipresence, shaped how emperors were remembered, how their reigns were judged, and how their legacies endured. The boring history of court rituals, far from being dull, offers a chillingly clear window into the human cost and the intricate mechanisms required to sustain the dazzling, yet isolating reality of absolute power. The dazzling reality of absolute power was not just built on surveillance but on presentation. And perhaps no element of presentation was more meticulously crafted, or more physically demanding, than the daily attire of an emperor. You have considered the omnipresent gaze, the intricate web of observation that defined court life. Now turn your attention inward, to the very skin of power, to the layers of silk and gold and fur that both proclaimed and confined the imperial body. Imagine yourself stepping into the emperor's private chambers as the first rays of dawn pierce through the heavy brocade curtains. The air, still cool from the night, carries the faint scent of incense and expensive fabrics. Servants move with hushed efficiency, their faces deferential, their hands practiced. Today you are not merely observing a man, but witnessing the meticulous construction of an icon, layer by painstaking layer. The process of dressing an emperor was not a simple act of putting on clothes. It was a ritual as precise and symbolic as any diplomatic ceremony. Every fold, every fastening, every piece of ornamentation held meaning. These garments were not designed for comfort, not for ease of movement, but for the projection of untouchable majesty, for the visible manifestation of divine right and earthly dominion. You see the first layers appear. Not just a simple tunic, but perhaps fine linen, almost transparent in its weave, chosen for its softness against the skin, and its ability to absorb sweat. This is the closest layer, the most intimate, yet even it is prepared by unseen hands, laundered with special care, perhaps even perfumed. Over this, a heavier silk shift, perhaps embroidered with subtle patterns that would never be fully seen, but whose presence added to the garment's integrity, its hidden strength. The true work begins with the outer robes. Consider a Chinese emperor, for example, during the height of the Qing dynasty. You might envision the dragon robe. Not just a single piece of cloth, but an entire universe woven into silk. The fabric itself is heavy, thick with precious threads. Gold and silver threads glint even in the dim light, forming coiled dragons with 5 claws, symbols of imperial authority. These dragons are not merely flat images. They are three-dimensional, embroidered with such skill that their scales seem to ripple, their eyes to follow your gaze. They chase flaming pearls, symbols of wisdom and power, across waves of cosmic water at the hem, and among clouds that drift towards the collar. Feel the weight of such a robe as it is lifted and carefully settled onto the emperor's shoulders. It is not light. A single robe, especially one meant for grand ceremonies, could weigh several kilograms, perhaps even more. Imagine carrying that weight hour after hour, under the intense scrutiny of the court, through lengthy rituals and endless audiences. It restricts movement, forces a certain posture. Your back must remain straight, your shoulders squared, your head held high. Slouching is not an option. The very garment demands an unwavering dignity. The materials themselves were a testament to imperial wealth and global reach. Silks, of course, from the imperial workshops, sometimes spun with gold or silver. Brocades so rich they could stand on their own. Furs, brought from distant northern lands, sable or ermine, not just for warmth but for their luxurious softness and visual opulence. Jewels were sewn directly into the fabric. Pearls, jade, sapphires, rubies, glittering subtly or blazing boldly, depending on the light and the occasion. Each gem was carefully selected, each stitch precisely placed by master artisans who labored for months, even years, on a single imperial ensemble. As the heavy robe is adjusted, perhaps a wide, stiff belt is brought forward. This is not merely functional. It is a further canvas for display. Buckles of polished jade, plaques of gold engraved with auspicious symbols, pouches containing imperial seals or significant tokens. These belts might further restrict your breathing, making a deep sigh or a relaxed posture impossible. Every breath becomes a conscious effort, every movement a deliberate act. Then come the layers. Sometimes, especially in colder climates, several robes might be worn simultaneously, one over the other, each of diminishing richness but adding to the overall bulk and warmth. You might start with an inner silk gown, then a padded jacket, then a formal outer robe, and finally, for specific outdoor events, a heavy cloak lined with fur. Think of the cumulative effect of these layers. The rustle of silk, the warmth building up, the sheer volume of fabric surrounding you. You are encased, protected, but also imprisoned by your own splendor. The footwear too tells a story. Imperial boots are not practical for long strides or hasty retreats. They are often stiff, made of thick embroidered silk or leather, with elevated soles or intricate designs that signify status. You would take small, deliberate steps, almost gliding, your movements slowed and controlled by your shoes. The very act of walking becomes a measured, stately performance. Each step resonates with the power of your office. And then the headwear. This is perhaps the most iconic symbol of imperial power. Whether it is a towering crown adorned with 1,000 jewels, a ceremonial hat with elaborate plumes, or a meticulously styled wig powdered white and reaching extravagant heights, it is never light. It sits on your head, a constant physical reminder of the burden of your office. The crown jewels alone could be worth the annual income of an entire province. The weight of gold, precious stones, and the intricate metalwork presses down, a literal manifestation of the weight of the crown. Imagine a European monarch, say Louis XIV. His wigs alone were legendary. Not just a simple hairpiece, but an architectural marvel of human hair, carefully coiffed, powdered, and often perfumed. These were heavy, hot, and undoubtedly itchy, yet they were an essential part of the Sun King's daily costume. They added height, majesty, and an aura of artificial perfection. You would spend hours in the morning not just being dressed but being wigged, painted, and adorned, a living statue coming to life for the day's performance. The implications of this attire extend far beyond mere aesthetics. Physically, it was a constant source of discomfort. The weight, the heat, the restricted movement, the chafing of embroidered edges against your skin. Every day began with a battle against your garments, a submission to the demands of your public persona. You could not run, you could not slouch, you could not simply relax. Your body was molded by your clothes, forced into a posture of perpetual dignity and distant authority. Psychologically, this constant physical burden reinforced the emperor's unique position. The clothes separated you from others, literally and figuratively. They were a barrier, a uniform that transformed the man into the monarch. Every morning, as the layers were added, the individual faded, and the imperial institution emerged. This ritual of dressing was a daily act of self-effacement, of sacrificing personal comfort and identity for the sake of the crown. For the servants involved in this intimate ritual, the experience was also complex. They were granted unparalleled proximity to the emperor's body, a privilege that could be both dangerous and advantageous. Their hands touched the most sacred garments, adjusted the most priceless jewels. They saw the emperor not just as a distant deity, but as a man struggling with the weight of his robes, perhaps even wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. This intimate knowledge gave them a unique, if silent, power. Their discretion was paramount. A misplaced pin, a wrinkle in a sacred robe, or a whispered word about the emperor's physical state could have dire consequences. Consider the economics of imperial attire. The cost was astronomical. Vast sums were spent on the raw materials. The finest silks from China, rare furs from Siberia, jewels from India or Africa. Then there was the labor. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of weavers, embroiderers, tailors, jewelers, and artists working in imperial workshops, dedicated solely to producing the emperor's wardrobe and that of the immediate imperial family. These workshops were often mini-economies in themselves, employing generations of skilled artisans whose lives were dedicated to the meticulous craft of imperial dress. The sheer amount of human effort and material wealth poured into these garments is almost incomprehensible. It was a conspicuous display of wealth, a constant reminder to both subjects and foreign dignitaries of the boundless resources at the emperor's command. The implications were also social and political. The emperor's attire was a carefully curated language spoken without words. The colors, the symbols, the materials, even the cut of the garments, conveyed messages about his status, his mood, his intentions, and his place in the cosmic order. Specific colors, for example, were often reserved exclusively for the emperor. The imperial yellow in China or royal purple in Rome, so rare and expensive to produce that only the emperor could afford it. To wear such a color without permission was an act of treason. Beyond the emperor himself, the attire of the entire court was a rigid hierarchy. You would see courtiers dressed in robes that mimicked, but never quite equaled, the emperor's splendor. The number of dragons on a prince's robe, the grade of silk, the type of embroidery, the specific jewels, all were meticulously regulated. Every person at court was a walking billboard of their rank and their relationship to the imperial center. A subtle change in permissible fabric, a new ornament, could signify a rise or fall in favor. To violate these sartorial rules was to challenge the entire social order, to disrespect the emperor's authority. Even within an emperor's wardrobe, there were different levels of formality. The robes for daily wear, though still magnificent, might be less heavy, less encrusted than those for a state ceremony, a coronation, or a religious festival. There were specific garments for hunting, for military reviews, for mourning, and for celebratory occasions. Each outfit was chosen not just for its beauty, but for its appropriateness to the specific ritual, reinforcing the idea that every aspect of imperial life was a formalized performance. Imagine attending a grand audience. You would enter a vast hall, perhaps paneled with polished wood or adorned with frescoes, filled with hundreds of courtiers, all dressed in their finest, arranged in precise order according to their rank. But your eyes would be drawn inevitably to the emperor. His figure, already elevated on a dais, would be further amplified by his magnificent attire. The way the light catches the gold thread, the subtle shimmer of the silk, the glint of jewels, all conspire to make him seem larger than life, almost superhuman. His clothes are not just covering his body, they are amplifying his presence, making him an unmissable focal point, a dazzling sun around which the entire court revolves. The quiet rustle of your own silk robes as you bow, the faint scent of others' perfumes, the soft murmur of hushed voices, all these sensory details add to the atmosphere of controlled opulence. You are part of this grand tableau, but you are also acutely aware of your place within it, a place defined in part by the fabric on your back. Think of the contrast between the private man and the public persona. In the quiet solitude of his bedchamber, the emperor might shed these heavy, restrictive garments, exchanging them for simple, comfortable sleepwear. It must have been a profound relief, a temporary shedding of the burdens of office. Yet even in this private space, the anticipation of the morning ritual would linger. The brief respite was merely a prelude to the next day's performance, the next donning of the imperial armor. This duality is key to understanding the life of an emperor. He was both a man susceptible to discomfort and fatigue, and a living symbol, an embodiment of the state. His attire was the principal tool for bridging this gap, for transforming the mortal into the immortal, the individual into the institution. The clothes were a mask, a shield, and a declaration all at once. The history of imperial attire, far from being a trivial detail, reveals volumes about the nature of power. It speaks of enormous wealth, meticulous craftsmanship, rigid social hierarchies, and the psychological burdens placed upon those who wore the crown. It shows how even the most intimate aspects of daily life, like getting dressed, were transformed into grand rituals, designed to reinforce authority and maintain the dazzling, yet isolating reality of absolute power. The threads of an emperor's robe were not merely decorative. They were woven with the very fabric of his dominion, a constant, weighty reminder of the position he occupied and the immense sacrifices it demanded. You have explored how the very fabric of an emperor's attire was woven with the threads of his dominion, transforming him from a man into a living symbol. But beyond the gleaming silks and weighty jewels, another, far more pervasive, and perhaps even more potent force was at play in the maintenance of imperial power. This force was repetition. Not the grand, singular spectacle, but the quiet, relentless rhythm of daily life at court. The ceaseless, predictable cycle of action and interaction that, over time, sculpted the very bedrock of authority. Imagine yourself now stepping into this world not just for a moment but for a lifetime. You wake up with the sun, or perhaps a little before it, within the sprawling, intricate machine of an imperial palace. It does not matter if this is Versailles in the age of Louis XIV, the Forbidden City under the Ming, or the Topkapi Palace during the height of the Ottoman Empire. The specifics might change, but the underlying principle, the steady, unwavering drumbeat of ritualized repetition, remains remarkably consistent. This is the true sound of power, the echo of eternity itself. For you, as a courtier or even as the emperor, your days are not a series of spontaneous events. They are a meticulously choreographed dance, a script written not just for you, but for generations. Every gesture, every word, every entrance and exit, is precisely mapped. This is not arbitrary. It is a deliberate, ancient technology of governance. It is designed to embed hierarchy so deeply into the subconscious that it feels as natural and unchangeable as the rising and setting of the sun. Consider this simple act of waking. For a monarch, this was rarely a private affair. In the Palace of Versailles, for example, the lever, the emperor's ceremonial waking, was a highly formalized event, a carefully staged drama repeated daily. You, as a favored noble, might have the immense privilege of entering the king's bedchamber as he slowly stirred. The sequence of attendance was rigid. First, the most intimate servants, then close family, then high-ranking officials, each group admitted in ascending order of importance. You would observe the king being dressed, a performance of profound symbolism. Each garment, from his innermost shirt to his outer coat, was presented with a specific deference, handled by specific hands. You would stand, silent, observant, absorbing the weight of this daily ritual. This was not merely about getting dressed. It was about witnessing the sacred process of the emperor becoming the emperor, again for another day. This relentless repetition served multiple crucial purposes. Firstly, it created an overwhelming sense of order and predictability. In a world where absolute power resided in one man, a world that could theoretically be plunged into chaos by a whim, the daily rituals provided an anchor. They demonstrated stability. They reassured everyone, from the lowliest servant to the most powerful minister, that the system was robust, enduring, and divinely sanctioned. This meticulous order was a shield against unpredictability, a bulwark against the inherent instability of human nature. Secondly, repetition was a powerful tool for social control and the reinforcement of hierarchy. Every ritual had its designated participants, its prescribed actions, its unspoken rules about who stood where, who spoke when, and who performed which task. You, as a courtier, learned your place through endless repetition. You saw who was granted closer access to the emperor, who was allowed to hand him a specific object, who was permitted to speak directly. These seemingly minor distinctions, endlessly enacted, became etched into your very being. They defined your status, your aspirations, and your limitations. To deviate was to challenge the entire structure, and such challenges were rarely tolerated. Take the simple act of an audience. Imagine yourself in the Imperial court of China. You would approach the emperor with a series of prescribed bows, prostrations, and salutations. Your gaze would be fixed not on his face, but on a designated spot, a symbol of humility and respect. Your words would be carefully chosen, often rehearsed, and delivered in a specific tone. This exact sequence, repeated day after day, year after year, for centuries, became an unbreakable tradition. It was not just good manners, it was the very enactment of cosmic order. The emperor, as the son of heaven, occupied a unique position between the celestial and terrestrial realms. Every ritual reinforced this connection, ensuring harmony in the empire. To perform the ritual incorrectly was not just an offense against the emperor, it was a potential disruption of the universal balance. The psychological impact of this constant repetition was profound, both for those serving the emperor and for the emperor himself. For the courtiers, it instilled a deep sense of discipline and obedience. Your life was structured around the emperor's rhythms. Your personal desires and comforts were secondary to the smooth functioning of the imperial machine. You learned to read subtle cues, to anticipate needs, to become a living part of the ritualized environment. This created a collective consciousness, a shared understanding of roles and duties, making the court a highly efficient, albeit often stifling, organism. Your identity became intertwined with your function within the grand tapestry of imperial ritual. For the emperor, while these rituals might have been incredibly burdensome and isolating, they also served to constantly reinforce his unique status. Every bow, every prostration, every deferential whisper, every carefully orchestrated movement around him, hammered home the message: you are not an ordinary man. You are the sacred center, the pivot around which the world revolves. This constant affirmation, repeated thousands upon thousands of times throughout his reign, solidified his self-perception as a ruler appointed by destiny, or by God, or by heaven. It transformed the individual into the institution, making the demands of the throne an integral part of his identity. He became the living embodiment of the unchanging ritual. Consider the daily meals. In many courts, dining was not just about sustenance. It was a public performance, another ritual to be meticulously observed. At the Byzantine court, for example, banquets were elaborate affairs, often accompanied by music, specific seating arrangements, and detailed protocols for serving and eating. Even the emperor's private meals might be served with immense formality, his food tasted by an array of servants to ensure safety, a silent, daily testament to the constant threats and immense precautions surrounding imperial life. You, as a court official, would participate in these rituals, perhaps standing for hours, observing the emperor, understanding that every bite he took, every sip of wine, was part of a larger, sacred choreography. This is the very essence of boring history, transforming into a pillar of power. The monotonous, the predictable, the seemingly trivial details of daily life, when repeated endlessly, accrued immense weight and meaning. What an outsider might perceive as tedious formality was, for those within the system, the very air they breathed, the structure of their universe. It was the rhythm that sustained an empire, the invisible hand that guided millions. Think about the deliberate absence of spontaneity. In a court driven by repetition, genuine surprise or unplanned events were often viewed with suspicion, as potential disruptions to the established order. The beauty, and indeed the terror, of these courts lay in their unyielding predictability. You knew what would happen next, day in and day out, year after year. This created a profound sense of continuity, an almost geological stability. Empires might rise and fall, but the rituals, the daily repetitions, seemed to echo through time, suggesting an immutable power structure. Let's delve deeper into the specific mechanics. Imagine a monarch, let us say in the Ottoman Empire, whose public appearances were highly stylized and carefully controlled. The process of holding court, the divan meetings, would follow a strict pattern. You, as a high-ranking official, would enter the majestic hall, assume your prescribed position, and remain silent unless addressed. The Sultan himself might often observe from behind a grille, a veiled presence, making his pronouncements through intermediaries. This added another layer of mystery and divine remoteness, reinforced by the unvarying format of these interactions. The repeated performance of these procedures, the same faces in the same places, the same flow of discussion and decree, projected an image of a well-oiled, eternal machine of governance. The ceremonial processions, too, were potent examples of repetition. Whether it was the emperor making his way to a temple, a mosque, or a state event, these movements were never simple transportation. They were spectacles, carefully designed and endlessly rehearsed. Imagine yourself standing among the crowds, watching the emperor pass by, surrounded by his retinue, his guards, his banners, his symbols of office. The sound of trumpets, the rhythmic march of feet, the flash of gold and silk, all repeated for every significant public appearance. These processions reaffirmed his presence, his authority, and his connection to the people, albeit from a distance. Each time the message was clear: this is the ruler, this is the power, and this power is constant. Even the architecture of these palaces and imperial cities played into this concept of repetition. The endless courtyards, the symmetrical halls, the repeated motifs in decoration, all contributed to an environment that felt vast, orderly, and unchanging. You would walk down the same corridors, pass through the same gates, see the same carefully manicured gardens day after day. This physical repetition mirrored the ritualistic repetition of human action, creating a total immersive experience of imperial authority. The very stones seemed to whisper of eternity. This focus on repetition was a sophisticated psychological strategy. It habituated subjects and courtiers alike to the idea of a stable, unshakable power. It made the emperor's rule seem not like an imposition, but like a natural phenomenon, as inevitable as the changing seasons. The predictability was comforting to some, stifling to others, but undeniable in its effect. It stripped away individuality in favor of institutional identity. Consider the role of servants. From the lowest scullery maid to the highest chamberlain, their tasks were often incredibly repetitive. Cleaning the same halls, preparing the same dishes, lighting the same lamps at the same time each evening. This collective, synchronized repetition of mundane tasks formed the unseen gears of the imperial machine. Each small, repeated action contributed to the grand, overall impression of seamless, eternal order. You, observing this vast network of precise, repeated actions, could not help but feel the immense, unyielding weight of the imperial system. The boring aspects of court life, therefore, were never truly boring in their effect. They were the slow, deliberate chiseling of absolute power onto the collective consciousness. They were the constant, subtle reaffirmation of the emperor's divine right or his mandate to rule. They were the psychological cement that bound together the vast and often disparate elements of an empire. The echoes of eternity were not found in dramatic pronouncements or sudden conquests, though those certainly had their place. They were far more often found in the soft rustle of silk as a courtier bowed for the 1000th time, in the precisely timed chime of a clock marking another hour in the imperial schedule, in the familiar footsteps down a marble corridor leading to an audience. These small, endlessly repeated actions accumulated into an overwhelming demonstration of permanence. They created a powerful illusion. The illusion that this emperor, this dynasty, this system would last forever. That it was not subject to the whims of mortals, but stood outside of time, ordained by forces far greater than any single individual. The daily, unvarying rituals whispered this message continuously, weaving it into the very fabric of daily existence. This was how they transformed the fragile reality of human rule into the seemingly immutable edifice of imperial dominion. So, when you reflect on the strange court rituals of emperors and their servants, do not dismiss the repetitive elements as mere fussiness or unnecessary ceremony. See them instead as the deliberate, potent instruments of power. They were the silent, ceaseless declarations of authority, the rhythmic pulse of an empire, designed to resonate through the ages, creating echoes of eternity that shaped the lives of millions and cemented the rule of one. These repetitive actions, seemingly mundane, were the enduring pillars upon which absolute power was built, a constant, quiet hum of control that permeated every corner of the imperial world.